I'd like to call the meeting in order of the Wilmington City Council. I'd like to welcome all those who are with us here this evening and all those who are watching us at home. Thank you for taking an interest in your government. This time I'd like to recognize Councilmember Clifford Barnett, Mayor Pro Tem. If you will please give us our invocation, if everyone will stand and remain standing afterwards for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
Let's pray. God, thank you for holding back the rain just for this right now moment. We thank you, God, for all of our right now moments because we know that they are orchestrated and ordered by you. So in this right now moment, God, would you grant us discernment? Would you grant us wisdom? Would you grant us the privilege to serve your people by doing the best job we can? For we ask it all in the name of him who died for us all. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Always like to recognize former elected leaders, and I also see that former Mayor Don Betts is with us. Welcome, Don. Good to see you again. Thank you, sir. At this time, I'd like to go to the consent agenda. I've been asked by the staff to take item C8 and to remove it from the consent agenda. We will hear that on a separate motion. So do I have a motion to accept this consent agenda items 1 through 7? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Ravenbark, second by Councilmember Andrews. Any discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. Item C8 is a resolution of the City Council of its intent to close an unimproved portion of South 23rd Street in the city of Wilmington, North Carolina. At this time, I'd like to recognize Chad McEwen, our Deputy City Manager, who's sitting in for our City Manager, Tony Caudle.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Member City Council. Planning Manager Patrick O'Mahony is going to present this item for us tonight.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. As mentioned, this is a street closure request that staff received for a portion of South 23rd Street. The item that was on the agenda tonight is a resolution to establish a public hearing for this item. Just to give some context surrounding the site, the site's located here adjacent to Gibson Avenue. I've also provided a map showing the greater context of the area, along with some photos of the existing site conditions, as well as the adjacent properties. Just to give a little background on the request, again, this is an unimproved portion of South 23rd Street. That's a gap in the roadway network from Gibson Avenue. Currently, there is no connection from Gibson Avenue to Confederate Drive or the remaining portion of South 23rd Street. There's also no connection between the Forest Hills Apartments to the south of this right-of-way and Gibson Avenue. So therefore, in meeting with city staff and the due diligence that we had done, we've come up with a negative recommendation for this request and recommended that the right-of-way remain open for the potential future connectivity. There were adverse impacts that were noted from city staff, which included traffic engineering, transportation planning, and engineering. There is also some stormwater infrastructure that's located within this right-of-way as well. So for all those reasons listed, staff recommended denial. This item was heard by the Planning Commission at their July meeting, and they recommended denial as well. I'm here to answer any questions that you have regarding this resolution. Again, this is a resolution to establish the public hearing, which would be 6 weeks out from now.
Do you have, Mr. Ravenbark? Well, just one question. I know at the end of the street, 23rd Street, is that correct? It's a cul-de-sac there, correct?
Yeah, there is a picture that I have. It would be the top right picture that you see on your screen here. It kind of just dead ends right into a grassy area. It's not quite a cul-de-sac. It's just more of a paved area.
Well, at the end of the street there seems to be a cul-de-sac.
On Gibson Avenue.
I'm sorry, on Gibson Avenue. I'm
Yes.
sorry, on Gibson Avenue. And looking at it, I'm just wondering why a connection could be made to that, through that cul-de-sac to Gibson.
So the Gibson Avenue right-of-way does continue. It continues down along, there's the creek there as well. So that, as the right-of-way continues along to the east, it's located within a floodway in the floodplain. So for future connectivity, staff determined that the ideal future connection would be this right-of-way location and not the continuation of Gibson Avenue due to the environmental features there.
And this was originally, I guess, when the Forest Hills Apartments were built many, many years ago, this particular access point was just never opened.
Correct.
It was just left that way.
Correct.
And the concern is that if it's ever redeveloped, it has a second access there.
Right.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Joyner?
Looking at this photograph, the green image, the site, is that privately owned by the homeowners on either side?
That is public right-of-way. That is city-owned public right-of-way.
So this might be a question for Madam Attorney. Are we dealing with potential adverse possession issues with some of those hedges, and I see vehicles parked there?
You can't adversely possess government property, so we're not worried about that, but it is a right-of-way, so we can, if needed, we can address those issues when we need it.
Okay. Ms. Rumbar?
Generally, when something like this comes up, it's been a request. There's an applicant that's the two adjoining property owners. What brought this in front of us?
It was applicant initiated as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So you're asking us to go ahead and vote on this to establish the public hearing on this particular item?
Staff recommended denial of the resolution request, so we're recommending denial of setting up a public hearing, but of course, if council wishes to establish a public hearing for September.
Well, I personally would like to, because this, I guess the property owners on either side are the ones that have made requests to close this particular right-of-way and give them an opportunity to make their case to the council. I think it's only fair, understand where you folks are coming from, but like to hear from them and to hear from their council, whoever may be representing them.
Of course.
Okay. All right. So can we go ahead and make a motion? We have a motion approved by Councilmember Andrews, second by Councilmember Rivenbark. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is our public information. We have 6 speakers that have signed up to speak with us this evening. Each speaker will be allotted 5 minutes. The city clerk will be keeping time of each person's time. Our first speaker will be Rabbi Ben Shaw, who will be speaking to us about the ceasefire resolution. Rabbi?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you, City Council members, for this opportunity to speak. I'd like to begin tonight with a question. Just who is this group that comes to the City Council meeting after meeting, month after month, with what they describe as a ceasefire resolution regarding a tragic conflict in the Middle East, insisting that you here in Wilmington weigh in on this complicated foreign affairs matter? Well, clearly they are small, they are vocal, and they are determined. Now they call themselves ILM for Peace in Palestine. What they are is part of a global campaign that has one strategy. That strategy is called, by some, death by 1,000 cuts. In other words, you wear down your enemy slowly and bleed them to death. Now, there's a military part of this that we see happening at this very time, a seven-front war waged against Israel and the United States by Iran and its proxies. And there is a political front to this campaign, this death by 1,000 cuts, and that is to go to city council after city council, resolution after resolution, in order to demonize Israel, the only Jewish state in the world, and its partner, its enabler in their thought, the USA. Now, they want us to think, and you'll hear from them, I assume, tonight, that their only objective is peace and sparing the people of Gaza more suffering. And indeed, there is suffering in Gaza, without a doubt. But if that were the case, they were only interested in peace and relieving suffering, then why is it that they, and you'll hear tonight, they ignore the role of Hamas in brutalizing its own people and using them as cannon fodder? And why do they ignore the bloody hand of Iran and its proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and the allies in Iraq of Iran, that foment violence and terror throughout the Middle East? Why do they ignore Iran with its willingness to lay waste to countries like Lebanon and Syria and Yemen, and of course Gaza as well, in order to export its Islamic revolution and destroy its enemies, the little Satan, Israel, and the United States, the big Satan? In fact, just yesterday, there were U.S. soldiers wounded by Iran-backed militia in Syria. Now, why do they ignore these factors? And you'll hear it as they speak tonight, assuming they do. And why do they ignore so many other factors in this tragedy for the people of the Middle East? And why will they hold up to you tonight, the leadership of Wilmington, a lens that focuses solely on the Palestinians as victims and Israelis as ruthless oppressors backed by a heartless American war machine? Because, ladies and gentlemen, their goal, whether they know it or not, at least some in the group know it or not, is to weaken and ultimately destroy Israel through ruining its reputation, and also to tear down the United States and undermine Western values. Now, this reality is made clear by taking one look at their Facebook page, ILM for Peace in Palestine. They are against the two-state solution. They call for continued armed resistance by the likes of Hamas, creating a dead end for the Palestinian people, and they justify, it's there in their Facebook page, they post this, they justify the murderous onslaught of October 7th as the actions of helpless victims of Western oppression. They see America as the colonial power seeking to impose its will on the downtrodden people of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, passing a so-called ceasefire resolution that has been offered time and time and time again, and you, thankfully, have chosen not to take it up. Passing such a ceasefire resolution by this group is falling into a trap set by those who want to tear down rather than to build up. Passing such a resolution will allow Wilmington to just be another city pressured by a small vocal group to make another cut, to bleed America and Israel, and yes, to bleed even the Palestinian people who long for dignity and prosperity and partnership with their Israeli neighbors. Thank you.
Next speaker is Mr. Jonathan Lacefield, who will be speaking to us about an Israeli ceasefire. Is Mr. Lacefield here? Mr. Lacefield? Okay. Go on to the next speaker with Mr. John Graves, concerns about a second bridge into Wilmington. Is Mr. John Graves here? Okay. Third speaker is Ms. Debbie Smith, who will be speaking to us about a ceasefire resolution for the Gaza war. Is Debbie Smith here? There we go.
Honorable members of the Wilmington City Council, my name is Debbie Smith, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you today. I am president and chairperson of the Wilmington Jewish Film Festival. It is a volunteer position that I've held for the last 8 years, and I'm very proud of the impact that we have made and the contributions we have made to the Wilmington's cultural community. But I'm here to speak to you as a private citizen and a proud Jew. I recently became aware that the Wilmington City Council has been asked to adopt a ceasefire resolution for the Gaza war. I am surprised that this is something that would be presented to a city council to be considered when this issue has nothing to do with city planning or budgeting. Whether the city whether the Wilmington City Council adopts this resolution or not, it will have no impact on the war in Gaza and what is happening in the Middle East. But for many of us in Wilmington, signing this resolution could be sending a message to many Wilmingtonians that the council is siding with Hamas and condoning the atrocities they inflicted on the Israelis on October 7th. This resolution does not address the hostages still being held captive by Hamas. And I might add, these are hostages not only from Israel, but there are Americans and other nationalities among those being held. I believe that calling for an immediate ceasefire without addressing the hostages or a plan for a Palestinian government will only guarantee that Hamas remains in power. I would like to remind everyone that after the Israelis left Gaza in 2005, the Palestinians voted Hamas in as their leaders. However, most of the monies that have been poured into the Gaza area from around the world for the good of the Palestinians have been confiscated by Hamas to build tunnels and to stockpile food and arms for themselves. As a reminder, on October 6th, there was a ceasefire with Israel. It was only after October 7th when Israel was attacked by Hamas and over 1,200 innocent Jews and others were purposely murdered did Israel go back into Gaza to retaliate against Hamas. It is very simple that if Hamas would return all hostages, then there would be an immediate ceasefire. I feel for the Palestinians and their plight. I would like nothing more than for Hamas to agree to release all of the hostages and allow a responsible Palestinian leadership to take control. This would be the fastest way to end the conflict and all of the suffering that is taking place in Gaza. I, too, want to see peace in the Middle East for all groups involved. However, the situation is much more complex and nuanced. By declaring here in Wilmington a resolution for a ceasefire, this would only alienate many people in our community. I hope the City Council would agree not to take on this resolution of a ceasefire in Gaza and would focus on the many other more important matters concerning our fine city. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Jake Martin, who will be speaking to us about a ceasefire resolution.
Hello, City Council. My name is Jake Martin. I'm a proud resident of Wilmington and apparently a member of a global coordinated campaign. The last time I addressed you was in late March, nearly 6 months into the most visible, widely documented genocide in modern history. I am, quite frankly, devastated to be here again nearly 5 months later, 305 days into the same genocide, pleading the same case before you. My question to you is this: how much longer will you stay silent about the most urgent, clear-cut, morally simplistic humanitarian crisis on the planet today? And have no confusion, it is all of those things. A full year? 2 years? Will you wait until every child, parent, and grandparent has been bombed or buried under the rubble to asphyxiate? At this point, what mind-numbing horrors would outweigh the vague threat of division that our detractors in these meetings keep referring to? The only division that you see here is between those who condemn genocide and those who think that this genocide is a good one, actually. Passing a ceasefire resolution won't draw any new lines between those groups, I promise you. So again, I ask you, what mind-numbing horrors could inspire you to act at this point? Here's a quick list of what has happened just since the last time this City Council held a meeting. First, a new study about the death toll in Gaza was released by the world-renowned medical journal, The Lancet. They estimate that over 186,000 in Gaza have died already in under a year. Next, on July 24th, roughly 75% of our U.S. Congress attended a speech in our nation's capital by Benjamin Netanyahu. The man leading a genocide with multiple ICC arrest warrants out for him was welcomed on our own soil. Thousands of Americans protested outside in the streets, while our Congress gave him a standing ovation. Then, on July 29th, an IDF soldier posted a video to social media in which he plants explosive devices and blows up the central water reservoir for the city of Rafah, one of the largest cities in Gaza. He posted this blatant war crime willingly for all the world to see under the orders of his commanders. Also on July 29th, after a pattern of horrific sexual abuse of Palestinian prisoners was uncovered in Israeli detention facilities, where over 30,000 Palestinians are being held currently, Israel's military police attempted to arrest 9 of their own soldiers accused of rape. They were met by a mob led by members of Israeli parliament who resisted the arrest, and after hours of rioting and occupying government buildings, they freed the arrested soldiers. It was, quite literally, a riot for the right to rape Palestinian prisoners, many of whom are held without charge in these torture camps. Then, on July 30th and 31st, Israel conducted 2 political assassinations in 2 foreign countries in under 24 hours. The first was an airstrike on Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, assassinating a senior Hezbollah commander. The second assassination was of the political chief of Hamas in Tehran, the capital of Iran. This was the man leading the ceasefire negotiations and hostage negotiations that these people seem to care so much about. What message does that send to them? Furthermore, these reckless assassinations on foreign soil are further confirmation of what we've all known from the start. Israel is trying to draw Iran, Lebanon, Yemen, and any other regional power into an all-out military conflict, an all-out war, which would force the U.S. to double down and give them even greater support. More money, more bombs, more protection from UN investigations, and potentially even boots on the ground. All of this since the last time we met in this room. And I didn't even mention all the schools, hospitals, and refugee camps they bombed in that time frame. So if you're still asking, why are we bringing this to you, the City Council of Wilmington? I'll answer that with another question. Who else should we go to? The people who clapped like trained seals for Netanyahu in Congress? We have been calling and emailing these people for a year. We've protested in the streets. We've posted on social media. All the proper channels. Silence. Nothing. They can't be reached as long as AIPAC is still funding their re-election campaigns. If we can't reach them, it is on you to represent the will of your constituents to them. A signed ceasefire resolution from our City Council would add momentum and urgency to our demands. We have repeatedly been given the middle finger by those congressional representatives, but I will be damned if I accept that callous treatment from you who represent us here. It's up to you how you address us, but we will not accept your silence. I'm going to end with the same demand that I ended with nearly 6 months ago. Cease fire now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Corey Emerine, who will be speaking to us about Pedal Pub presentation.
Hello, City Council, and good evening. I'm here from Pedal Pub. I'm Corey Emerine. I'm the owner of the franchise here in Wilmington. We have not yet opened because we have a few more details that we need to have addressed with you and maybe with some of the inspectors to approve our routes and to make everything legit. You currently have Trolley Pub here in Wilmington who has a resolution that was made for them to be able to have public consumption on their bikes while in the city streets in a certain route. That resolution just reads their name, and we were seeking to see if we could have our name on that resolution and or another resolution made to approve our routes, which are different than theirs, and also to allow us to have the consumption of beer and wine on the bikes. They're really just tour bikes. Pedal Pub is the largest multi-person pedal tour experience in the world. We have over 150 bikes on the streets. They're in over 50 cities around the United States and Canada. We do over 50,000 annual tours. In each market that Pedal Pub comes to, it drives tourism, resident engagement, and revenue to local businesses, because we partner with certain establishments around town. Currently, you have only Charlie Pub, and we would suggest that, you know, the competition would be good and also give your tourists and residents another avenue to visit different places in the city. So a Pedal Pub bike is a 16-passenger bike. The People Pedal, it also has an electric assist motor on it to help in some of these hills near the river, would be especially important. But everyone, you know, sits on the bike and pedals, and we go through the city and we stop at different places and see different tourist attractions around town. We offer two different types of tours. One is a family-friendly with if there's anyone under 21 on the bike, there's not allowed to be any alcohol on it. That would be for like children's, kids' birthday parties, you know, just groups of people that don't want to have drinks but still want to tour the city. And then the other option would be the ones with alcohol, where we have many rules and regulations that I have actually too many to go through, but I did email all of you this presentation that I'm reading from, so you could see them on your own time. And also in that, not to mention in that resolution with Trolley Pub, there is a whole page of rules in which they have to follow for the city, and I have read that, and we would follow every rule as well as they do. So with that, safety, of course, is a top priority. We have all of our, we call them pilots. They will have to get basically what is like a taxi driver license in your city. That was information given to me from Inspector Bluford, as I talked to him a couple of months ago regarding routes, and he told me that I had to get this resolution taken care of in order to have us be allowed to do the same business as Charlie Pub. And basically, like I said, their route is very strict. Our route is also going to be, well, what I have looked to be strict also, and not in the same places as them, so we're not clogging the streets with these bikes. I also would like to offer different routes, which is one is your cargo district that you now have that I think is very different and cool. So we will have a route that goes downtown and see some of the scenery down there, but also we want to have a route that goes to the cargo district and visit some of those local businesses as well. And then in that email, I also did include the routes that I proposed to use, and I also included Inspector Bluford on that for that as well. And on these routes, just for your information, like that, we've already partnered with several establishments, bars in the area. We've rented space outside of near Highwire in the Soda Pop district to store the bikes, where Highwire has agreed to let us start our tours there, and Bowstring next door has allowed us to end the tours there so we can pick up the next ones at Highwire. In the cargo district, we've teamed up with Fermental and End of Days already, and they're excited to get going, and we've already done collaborative posts with them online, and we're just trying to get everything buttoned up so we can get this thing rolling. Downtown, we've teamed up with Ironclad and Pour Tap Room. It's two places we plan to visit while we're in the downtown route. Basically, the next steps for us is we actually were originally planning to open in July, but that's obviously hasn't happened. We're looking towards the end of this month. Any direction from you on how we can get that done in a timely manner would be greatly appreciated. I've also been told we need to have the bikes here and inspected by the city in order to be kind of classified as like a vehicle for hire taxis. So that's also something that I'm willing to step up and get that taken care of, as long as we can, come up to a way to get this going so we can get opened and rolling.
Sir, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Sir, have you had any meetings with city staff at all, or you're just coming, because you've been here twice and you've sent council some emails, but have you had any discussions or meetings with?
I have had some emails with people back and forth. I think it was the city manager and the city attorney.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't here the other time. It was one of my employees. I was out of the country, and he didn't understand exactly what he needed to come in here and ask for. But yes, no, we have talked with that. We've talked to the zoning. It all came down to I needed to come here and get city council to give city staff direction to go ahead and do a resolution to add our business onto that, or make a new one with, including, or with us on there.
Okay, so you've already met with all the various amounts of city staff, and they directed you to come to us in a public information to ask for a resolution?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our public information segment. We're about to go in.
Mr. Mayor, I'm
Yes.
sorry, if I may, if we could get some staff direction on whether council would like for us to propose, to bring you something to allow for additional trolley pub operations, because right now, I think there are two issues. One is when we originally allowed the trolley pub to come in, we did it like we normally do with the Azalea Festival and anybody else that wants to have an event or a business that sells beverages, alcoholic beverages on city property, because it was going to be on city streets. So we did a specific resolution for the trolley pub because they were the only ones here. What I would probably recommend at this point is instead to just amend the code to allow anyone who's operating as a trolley pub to have the same conditions that were originally put in that resolution about needing to have your route approved, about what types of alcoholic beverages, beer and wine, but no liquor, when you can operate, that type of thing, and to just put that in our regular code. And if you give us some direction, if you'd like to do that, we can certainly do that for you.
Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
That's a good idea, please.
Bring us something forward.
And we'll probably also need to increase the number of limousine licenses because they're treated as limousine permits. I think we're up at our ceiling of 50, and so I'll probably also bring something to raise that to either 55 or 60 so that we can accommodate multiple permits,
Very good.
if that's okay.
Okay.
And I'll try to bring that back to you at the next session so that they can move forward, at least by the end of August.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that concludes our public information segment. We're about to go into public hearings, but before we go into item PH1, we were notified by the applicant of item PH3, a request to continue that item to September the 3rd, 2024. And I would like to ask the councils to go ahead and move that, so in case anybody's here for item PH3, to understand that this item will be aired on September the 23rd. So we have a motion to move that particular item to September the 3rd, 2024. We have a motion approved by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Andrews. Further discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. We'll hear that item on September the 3rd. That brings us to our first item of business, which is our public hearings. Item PH1 is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 2.39 acres of land located at 1320 Independence Boulevard from R15, Modern Density Single Dwelling District to O&I CD Office and Institutional Conditional District for a commercial district mixed use, better known as a CDMU development. At this time, I'd like to recognize our Deputy City Manager, Chad McEwen. Mr. McEwen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Associate Planner Miranda France is going to present this item this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Site is located at the intersection of Oleander Drive and Independence Boulevard, contains approximately 2.39 acres, and is currently vacant. This map shows the general vicinity surrounding the request, as well as photos of the subject property. These are photos of the existing conditions surrounding the subject property. And these are photos of the adjacent properties and their land uses. The site is currently zoned R15, Moderate Density Single Dwelling District, and is bordered by RB Regional Business to the southeast and east, ONICD Office and Institutional Conditional District to the south, and R15 to the north and west. The applicant proposes to rezone the subject site to ONICD for a CDMU development, and the project would consist of 16 three-bedroom townhome units and a 4-story, 32,900 square foot mixed-use building, which includes 24 one-bedroom units and 2,270 square feet of commercial space. Additionally, the project would provide driveway access from Independence Boulevard and require improvement of the rear alley. In front of you are conceptual elevations of the proposed townhomes and mixed-use building.
Excuse me, please. Could you please speak a little bit louder for the folks to be able to hear? Thank you.
The site is located within an urban mixed-use center, a transit-oriented mixed-use center, along a high-capacity transit route, a major corridor and regional parkway, community parkway and loop road, and an existing greenway on the comprehensive plan's growth strategies map. The proposal includes additional housing units along 2 major corridors while serving as a transition from higher intensity uses and the existing neighborhood to the west. Site plan proposes enhanced pedestrian connection to the Cross-City Trail, dedication of land to improve an alley as an access point, and proposes missing middle housing near commercial services. Additionally, the site is within walking distance of 3 grocery stores, a park, and multiple commercial services, and is along a multi-use path and transit line. Staff believes the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the recommendations of the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and that the request is reasonable and in the public interest. Staff recommends conditional approval with the conditions listed in the case summary be applied. Planning Commission also voted 4-1 to recommend approval at their July 10th meeting. That concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here as well.
Are there any questions of staff? Okay. Thank you, ma'am. This time I'd like to recognize the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, council members. My name is Sam Frank, and I represent the applicant. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. This proposed rezoning is for approximately 2.4 acres of land located at the intersection of Independence Boulevard and Oleander Drive. The proposed rezoning will change it from a moderate density single-family dwelling district R15 to facilitate the development and construction of a variety of home types. As you can see, the site is located in a neighborhood centered on this intersection of Independence Boulevard and Oleander Drive. The proposed development is in harmony with the existing commercial and more intense uses located on the other 3 corners of that intersection. It's a rendered site plan showing the proposed development, consistent with the site plan included in the conditions that are proposed here today. Contemplates a approximately 32,900 square foot mixed-use building, which will include 24 residential condominium units, and also 16 townhomes, as you see along the western edge of the property. The most important consideration for you in this rezoning, and any rezoning for that matter, is compatibility with the city's Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. As well described by our professional, objective, expert, and most importantly, unbiased staff, the proposed development is directly consistent with future development contemplated by the city in this location. Not only is this the bluest circle that I think I've ever seen in 10 years of doing this, there's not one single comp plan criteria that was identified as not supported by staff. All but one of the criteria received either strong support or modest support, and the one remaining criteria was split. As Ms. France explained, this is also supported by the Comprehensive Growth Strategies map. The property is located within an urban mixed-use center and along the edge of a high-density transportation place type. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan. Several of the factors and criteria in that plan are well met by this proposal. That is no coincidence. This applicant has been working with staff for close to a year to refine a proposal that makes sense, not only for the development of the property, but also to be as consistent as possible with what the city has established as its guideposts, goals, and policies for future use of the land. One of those critical criteria is creating a place for everyone. We don't have enough houses in Wilmington. It's no surprise to you, I'm sure. I'm sure that's no surprise to you at all, and I suspect that you're all familiar with the Bowen study. This is a study that was commissioned by New Hanover County to evaluate just how far short we are on housing in Wilmington. It was done originally in 2020 and updated in 2022. As you can see, this reflects a shortage of for-sale homes of over 16,800 homes in the greater New Hanover County area. We can respond to that lack of housing one of two ways. We can embrace increased density and a greater variety of home types in locations that are close to existing infrastructure and close to established commercial services, or we can embrace suburban sprawl, longer travel time between home, work, school, and the grocery store, and compelling many of those who work in our city to live outside of it. Our comp plan addresses that concept directly. And clearly, the better solution, as reflected on this highlighted passage from the comp plan, is to embrace the installation of greater density and greater variety of housing types in places that are already well situated to support it, just like this one. You've heard about missing middle housing, housing that serves the needs of homeowners who are looking for a home somewhere between a multifamily apartment and a single-family home with a yard. There's a variety of types of missing middle houses. This project is designed to deliver two of those types of homes, condominium units and townhomes. This proposed rezoning also supports the getting around concept described in the comprehensive plan. It's directly related next to two major roads that are well-equipped transportation routes for the residents of the proposed development. It offers two streamlined access points from the site, one access point to the existing alleyway, which would include additional dedication of land by the property owner, and one access point along Independence Boulevard. Both Independence and Oleander are operating at an exceptionally high level of service. This is unusual. It's unusual for our city. It's unusual for any city that's experiencing growth to see roads that are this significant operating at this high of a level of service with this great of additional capacity available. Transit-oriented development is also fostered by a diversity of transportation choices. There is an existing Wave bus stop adjacent to the site on Independence Boulevard. In connection with approval of the rezoning, you will also be directing the landowner to improve that bus stop and relocate it to make room for the driveway along Independence. It's also located immediately adjacent to the existing Cross City Trail. You can see the Cross City Trail on the plan. If you note also, there is a new point of interconnectivity between the alleyway and the city's Cross City Trail, located at the north end of the site, which is on the right side of the screen in front of you.
Excuse me, Sam. There's a,
Yes, sir.
There's a pointer there. Isn't there a pointer there that you could point to what you're talking about? Pardon?
Maybe.
It's
Yes,
not.
sir. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I appreciate that.
You're welcome, sir.
The sidewalk establishing the interconnectivity between the alley and the Cross City Trail is there. Oop. And the Cross City Trail, of course, is located along Independence, along the bottom of the screen there. Several additional comprehensive plan policies that are supported by this proposed rezoning, changing places and revitalizing spaces, unique spaces and captivating spaces, nurturing our community, and opportunities for prosperity. Not only is this plan consistent with our future desired land uses, but it's also consistent with the adjacent zoning. As you can see, this site is surrounded on all other three corners of the intersection by more intense land use. The land located to the east is the most intense zoning district that we have in the city, RB. The land that's located to the south is O&I conditional and multifamily, and the land that's located to the southwest is multifamily MD17. And of course, the land that's located to the northwest of the site is an R15 zoning district. This site is designed in an almost ideal location to serve as a transition between those more intense uses around the intersection and the less intense existing residential use located to the northwest of it. Several significant benefits of this site plan and design, and I should explain, although I think that you all understand well, but for the sake of explanation into what I'm getting ready to say, with conditional zoning, there are specific requirements imposed on the property. Material consistency with this site plan is probably the most important of those conditions. So this is not a straight rezoning to an O&I district where any of the uses permitted under O&I would be permitted, but rather a conditional zoning where the development must be consistent with all the conditions, including material consistency with the site plan that you see before you. You got 2 points of access, one primary point of access along the alley, one primary point of access along Independence Boulevard. By developing the land in this cohesive manner, you're able to use a limited number of points of access to serve as the primary access for all 40 of the homes. The landowner will dedicate 10 feet of land along the western edge of the property to the alley. So that will allow for expansion of the alley, and the landowner, the applicant, will be required to improve the alley. That alley is tight. I don't know if you have had an opportunity to see it or had reason to drive through that particular right-of-way. This picture shows you the current condition of it. The pavement is less than 6 feet or wide or so. And as you can see, there's pretty significant encroachment on both the east side from the homes and lots located along that stretch, and also pretty significant natural growth encroachment on the west side. By dedicating an additional 10 feet of land and improving the alleyway, we'll take the width of that pavement from 6 feet to 18 feet for the entire length of this property, thereby significantly improving a public access right-of-way. This proposal includes stormwater, as it must, and the way that we chose to address stormwater in this design is through an engineered wetland. I hadn't seen one of those before, and so I pulled some images in case you had not. This is an example of what an engineered wetland looks like. At times when it is not actively trapping and treating water, it looks like green space. That stormwater treatment facility, we'll call it, is located along the Cross-City Trail and along the eastern edge of the property, below the driveway shown on the image and above the Cross-City Trail. The plan includes incorporation of 2 EV parking spaces, an additional bike parking network of sidewalks to encourage both pedestrian and bicycle access. As I mentioned earlier, the plan evolved quite a bit over the last 10 to 11 months through our dialogue with staff. The applicant reduced the number of homes proposed by about 12%, reduced the size of the footprint of the condominium building, the multifamily building, which allowed for a greater opportunity to preserve trees, incorporated that dedication of additional land for the right-of-way that I described to you, incorporated an additional point of access along Independence in pre-TRC conversations with fire and with city engineer. We understand that that additional point of access is critical and desirable from the city's perspective, and so we added it to the design. Converted a traditional stormwater pond into an engineered wetland. Frankly, it's just more attractive. And for something that's going to exist along the Cross-City Trail, that's an asset not only to this development, but to the city. Commitment to relocate and improve the wave transit stop, incorporation of a 25-foot buffer along the northern property line, where this property immediately abuts an existing residential use. An addition of a commercial use to the mixed-use building, an adaptation of the proposed zoning from multifamily to O&I accordingly. As previously discussed, the proposed mixed-use development is absolutely consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and growth strategies map. This development will provide much-needed and organic variety of houses in an excellent location that will act as a fantastic transition between the existing uses on either side of it. In consideration of the foregoing and consistent with both staff's and the Planning Commission's recommendation, we respectfully request that this council approve the proposed rezoning. I understand and have reviewed some public comments that you have received and that have been provided to the city. I look forward to the opportunity to respond to those. In the event that anyone chooses to speak at the public hearing and share similar comments or additional ones, I'd like to respond to those as well and ask your permission to do so. In the interest of efficiency and time, I'd like to address all those things at one time after you complete the public hearing. And having said that, I'm eager and interested to answer any questions that you may have for us.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay. Ms. Andrews?
Yes, Mr. Frank. Can you tell me what is the price range that these townhomes and condos are going to go for?
I can estimate, but please understand that at this point, it's just that delivery of these homes, realistically 24 to 36 months away. We don't know what market conditions will be or what construction costs will be by the time that we get there.
Please, everybody, excuse me. Please, you'll have your opportunity to speak.
The range of cost for the townhomes and the condominium units should be between the high 300,000s to the low 600,000s.
So we're talking like the condos would be in the $300,000 range?
Excuse me, I'm just going to, officer, look, I know everybody's passionate about this and you'll have an opportunity to speak, but a lot of disruptions here. I'm going to have to ask those people to be removed from this chamber, and I do not want to do that. So please, allow the man to answer, allow the council members to ask the questions. Thank you.
Councilwoman Andrews, I'm going to confirm with my client before I clarify. I understand what you're asking me. Give me just a second.
Okay.
So with regard to the general range I provided, the 370 to 620 range, on average, the condominium units will be less expensive than the townhomes. The end unit townhomes are more expensive than the interior ones. And so I believe the answer to your question is that the condominium units would be closer to the lower end of that range, and the end unit townhomes would be the most expensive examples in that range.
Okay. But as far as like affordable housing, this is not intended to be any kind of affordable housing?
No. I mean, so affordable housing means something different from workforce housing under our code. No, it's not designed to be affordable housing. No, it's not designed to be workforce housing under our code because our code only contemplates rental when it comes to defining workforce housing, and the intention here is to offer homes for sale. And so the price of these will be not controlled by any sort of rent control, again, because it's not a for rent product. It's a for sale product. The price of it will be driven by whatever the market will bear when the homes are delivered. That said, there is a significant dearth of this kind of home. Small single bedroom condominium units and townhomes with 2 to 3 bedrooms is a housing product type that's generally missing or is in significant shortage, not only in the city, but in particular in this section of the city.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Joyner?
Good evening. I'm going to use my cell phone. I apologize. I normally have my other laptop up here, but there was a note in the case summary that was provided in the supporting documents on page 5 about a reduction of units after a community meeting. Can you describe to me what feedback you received, how that was applied to the project, and where within the project the decrease occurred?
Yes, sir. So the overwhelming feedback that we received echoes what I read in public comments submitted to you in advance of this hearing. 2 sentiments. One, that's undeveloped land that's had trees on it for a very long time. We don't want to see anything built there. And 2, we would rather have that land be developed as R15 as it's currently zoned today than developed in this fashion. In other words, there were not a lot of significant substantive comments about what could you do to make this more appealing to us as neighbors. The reduction in units, I'm going to turn around and look at my client to nod on this, but I believe the reduction in units was from 46 to 40, and that those 6 units were removed from the multifamily? Yeah, so the design leading into the community meeting contemplated smaller multifamily units and 6 more of them that would be offered for rent. Following the community meeting, the proposal was adapted to incorporate for sale and therefore slightly larger multifamily homes in the condominium building, and that took the total unit count from 46 down to 40.
That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Waddell?
Yeah, Mr. Frank, I apologize in advance to the crowd for my voice. I had a medical procedure last week and it's left my voice a little weak. I have a couple of questions. One is a technical question at this time, and the other is going to be involved with surrounding uses, and both will incorporate your maps. Could you go back to the technical site plan that you had?
Yes, sir.
That one right there. Top right corner, I asked this question yesterday. I'm still trying to just nail down on it because I live in the area and I'm very familiar with the neighborhood, but I'd never driven the alley. And a lot of the communications that I received from the citizens were drive the alley. So I did that yesterday. I did it again today. Your estimation is correct. It's tight. I do see that there's 10-foot of right-of-way to be dedicated. The existing right-of-way is showing as, what I believe is showing as 15 feet. I was just wondering if you or someone, if there's a technical member of the staff or a member of the applicant party, can explain the existing right-of-way as it is now and what it would become should we approve this application.
Yes, sir. Would you like me to go back to the image?
That'd be helpful. But I do. For me, it's a little helpful to see the technical plan that says. Sorry.
Got it. I'll go right back to it. So as you look at the pavement on the screen, on the image on the screen, this is looking from Oleander facing north. So the far end of this alley is the corner of the property that you were referring to. The right side of the pavement is the applicant's land, the land that's proposed for rezoning. And on the left side of that 15-foot right-of-way are several R15 lots with different types of structures and homes on them. The pavement, the right side of the pavement on this image almost abuts and in some cases actually winds into the applicant's property. The result, after dedication of 10 feet of additional land and widening of the pavement, is that that pavement will be 18 feet wide for the entire length of the applicant's property. And that 18-foot right-of-way will be shifted, the center line of that right-of-way will be shifted slightly to the right of the center line of the existing pavement. Does that answer your question, sir? And if not, we do have our civil engineer, Mark Strickland's here, and I can get more detailed if you'd like.
I may ask some follow-up on it, but I think that explains it. Effectively, the applicant, the property owner, would be dedicating, and by that, giving 10 feet, yes, 10 feet to expand the right-of-way and then finish it off to make it a 25-foot right-of-way.
Correct, exactly. And of course, the applicant's also on the hook to do the physical work to improve it.
The actual improvements would be done by them.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Could you also, thank you for that, could you also go to the surrounding uses slide that you had?
Yes.
That one.
Zoning or?
Nope, that one right there.
You got it.
The MD-17 that's shown down Oleander and Live Oak, is that the Oleander Courts condominiums?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Okay, I didn't know that was MD-17, so that's, there's no commercial component to the Oleander Courts condominiums, I guess?
That's my knowledge, but I don't claim to be familiar with it directly.
Do we have, there's not, right? Do we know how many units are in that?
I do not.
Thank you. That's it for me right now, Mr. Frank. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, sir. We have a question, Mayor Pro Tem.
With the alley, when, if this project goes through, the alley right now is only one car can go through at a time, basically.
If
So-
that, yes, sir.
So when you correct the alley, it will be able to do 2 cars?
It will be a public right-of-way after we improve it. And so the decision about whether it facilitates only one-way traffic or two-way traffic will be up to the city. I do note that we cannot widen and improve the alley north of the subject site. There's a section of the alley north of the subject site and up to Park that's beyond our control that we can't improve. And that will presumably stay in the condition that it's in today. That said, ultimately, the city gets to decide whether that's one way or two. Today,
Okay.
that alley is so narrow that it's unacceptable for the fire department. It's not utilized by the post office. It's not utilized by the UPS driver. It's not a viable means of ingress and egress. Widening it will certainly make it a more viable means of ingress and egress, but as to whether it's one way or two way, that'll be a call for
Yeah,
the city to.
and I guess more so I meant 2 cars could, I guess it's one way, 2 ways. 2 cars would go by or whatever.
Yes, sir.
Oh, it's
The
wide
average-
enough for 2 cars.
Yes, sir. The average width
All
of a
right.
car is about 6 feet, so an 18-foot wide piece of pavement will support 2 vehicles.
Okay, and then my last question would be, and it relates to something that Councilwoman Salette asked. This was not designed to be quote-unquote affordable housing.
No, sir.
It
That's
was
correct.
designed to be middle housing that provides opportunities for people to find a place to live.
Yes, sir. It's designed as a for-ownership product in terms of where it hits relative to the median and average home sale price in Wilmington. I need to defer to somebody more experienced than I to tell you what that number is. Some of these homes would be below that average. Some of them would be close to it or just above it. And so, but to answer your direct question, it is not designed or intended to be quote-unquote affordable housing. There's no rent control component
Right.
intended.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Frank.
Thank you.
This time, I know we have a lot of people going to want to speak. Our rules of order is we have a 30-minute public hearing. I think that Mr. Richardson is going to speak on behalf of a lot of you, and then, of course, we'll keep a time clock here. If we need some additional time, I will ask the council their preference, but at this time, I'm going to open up the public hearing, set the public hearing at 30 minutes. Mr. Richardson, you have the floor. I know that you're going to be speaking on behalf of a lot of the residents that are here, but I know that other residents would like to speak. So after that, it would be a 3-minute per person deal, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm
Thank you.
actually I'm going to yield the first speaker spot to Mr. and Mrs. Rayhauser because they have young kids.
Sure.
And they'd like to speak first, and then I'll come up.
Fine, thank you.
City Council. I keep hearing the term thrown around, matches up perfectly with the city's strategic plan. I keep kind of thinking about that, it matches what the city's strategic plan is. And on paper, I think that means one thing, but for a community that I live in, and I live on Hawthorne Road, it makes me wonder, is that really what the city wants? Is that the goal of the neighborhood, to put a bunch of townhomes and condos right behind a long historic neighborhood? I guess I just think about it from a more personal standpoint of, I made an investment to live in a neighborhood that was zoned R15. Buying a home can be one of your biggest commitments financially that you make for your family as you put money down and invest in the future. This is something that takes a considerable amount of thought, which we did when we picked to live right here. Now, if you drive that alleyway, which I think you mentioned you did, you see some homes have different types of protection behind their homes, you know, in terms of fences and privacy. We have probably the most robust privacy on that road in terms of our backyard leading up to the parcel being discussed. None of that privacy would have any type of use given that type of development is made on that property. So I guess from a personal standpoint, I feel like my rights are violated. I moved to an area that's R15, invest in my family, in the community that was set up by the city to be R15. I thought that was the city plan, R15. And then to be stripped from that for greedy reasons of someone who wants to put a large density of housing behind my home when he could clearly develop, you know, single-family homes. I just wonder, what are we really planning for as a city then? Are we planning to pad the pockets of people interested in developing larger projects? Or are we developing a city based on the wants and needs of our community? Just some thoughts there.
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council. I'm Grady Richardson, and I represent many of the folks that are here tonight. I represent 9 of the immediately adjacent Hawthorne Road owners along the alleyway in question. My job is to sort of set the table on the technical deficiencies with this project that Christine Hughes will also speak to as one of the, if not the primary author of your Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, and talking about how this application is entirely inconsistent with the principles in your plan based on cherry picking. Now, we talk about buffering. When the applicant gets up here tonight, because I've been in talks with the staff, I've submitted a formal zoning determination letter that has yet to be returned because it was just submitted late last week as I was interacting with staff. But here's what we've got right now that you're going to deal with. Can we put up the applicant's technical plan? Or that's fine too. Right now, staff is saying that there is no transitional buffering between the applicant's desired rezoning to the R15 because transitional buffering is not required along the alley because it, as a right-of-way, separates the 2 zoning districts. When pressed on that, then staff also says, when I ask about, okay, if transitional buffering is not required, how about streetscaping? The response I got is, streetscaping is required along all right-of-ways, but right-of-ways do not include alleys. So in other words, city staff is using the word alley to disqualify the right-of-way from streetscape requirements, and then turns around and uses the right-of-way to disqualify the project from transitional buffering requirements. This double exemption has led to being 0 buffering by the applicant with respect to going and multiplying on 6.5 multiples what they can build as a matter of right, going from 7 single-family homes to 40. Now, when you look at the developer who acquired the property, he got this property for a song, something like $400,000. That's because he knew and the seller knew that it was going to be met with this kind of opposition before you tonight about what he's trying to do. As Mr. Rayhauser was just telling you, the 9 folks that I represent and the other owners along Hawthorne Road all bought their property in reliance upon, among other things, the zoning. And Mr. Spatrino went and took the risk and got it for a cheap price. He took the risk that he was going to be able to come to you tonight, despite the heavy opposition, and talk about middle housing. Middle housing doesn't necessarily mean you put 40 units on it. We're not opposed to the development there. Why does it have to be 40 units with no buffering? Why can't it be patio homes or duplexes, which Ms. Painter said is missing middle housing? Missing middle housing includes patio homes and duplexes like you have at Dramtree and Sterling Place. It's not just condominiums and townhomes at 40 or 45 feet in height. Now, the reason why Mr. Spatrino is trying to donate the 10-foot strip of land to take it from 15 feet to 25 feet is because he has to, when he talks about, and I'm going to use the correct words, Mr. Frank said 2 primary points of access. He has to have 2 primary points of access to support what you're seeing on the screen. One of those primary points is on the alley. Why does that matter? Because he has to have a through street, 2 of them, to serve his project. So after he has city staff say no buffering is required, not transitional, not streetscaping, then he wants to come in and say, but that's a primary point of access. He's careful not to say street, but that's exactly what he needs is a through street to be able to support anything close to this without any buffering. You'll hear from Ms. Hughes how the alleyway and the reasons for why it's not included within the definition of streets or rights-of-way is not for the reason we have here. It's creating a tortured example of a developer coming in and trying to manipulate, with all due respect to Mr. Spatrino, he's trying to come in and manipulate the process, just like the second item I want to talk about. You have a quarter-mile requirement. He's able to say, according to staff, that he comes within a quarter mile of a grocery store. It's not just a grocery store, it's the entrance of a grocery store. When pressed, staff has said, well, we only considered a quarter of a mile as the crow flies. So one of my requests to the zoning determination is tell me where in your city code it says as the crow flies. It doesn't. So either he's within a quarter mile or he's not in a quarter mile. Why does that matter? If he's not within a quarter mile, then he doesn't get to drop his 20% requirement for mixed use, true mixed use in an O&I district. He doesn't get to drop it from 20% down to 5%. He has to maintain a 20% real commercial use, not 2,700 square feet that's going to sit vacant on this property. Another problem is, and it's been pointed out, and Mr. Chambers is not here, but his email has confirmed this, that on the site plan, can we go to my exhibit number 5, please? Leading up to tonight, because the Planning Commission, the Commission did not understand the point that I was trying to make. There is a 25-foot minimum required uses, minimum required radius where there's a travel way. And as you can see up there, the medians on this do not come anywhere near 25 feet. It's more like 3 feet. And Mr. Chambers said, well, that's something that will be taken up at Technical Review Committee. If he gets approved, when it goes before TRC, he'll have to address that. And if he doesn't, then he's going to have to alter his plan. So what the developer wants you to do is to approve this and hope that the TRC catches it. And what's going to happen, in my 26 years of experience, is the applicant's going to ask for a variance based on hardship of not being able to satisfy certain requirements. They talk about how their plan is consistent with the Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. 1.4.4 of your plan, they're nowhere near complying with this. Where appropriate transitions are not possible within a development site, infill and redevelopment adjacent to areas of lower intensities should provide effective physical buffers to avoid adverse impacts. Nothing about what you've been proposed tonight by the applicant provides any buffering whatsoever to the residents along Hawthorne Road that bought in reliance upon your zoning districts and R15 that's in their backyard that's supposed to be on this property. His deed says that he was buying it subject to the zoning. That zoning is R15 when he bought it. It's been R15 for years. They do not comply with that, as well as other principles in the comprehensive plan. The other thing about the buffering, and this is important, because staff does not consider an alley a street or a right-of-way, then the alley in question is all zoned R15. Why does that matter? Because under City Code Section 18-17, C as in Charlie, .7, it says the buffering and setbacks are required for an R15 district when you're going up against it. They cannot have it both ways, and we would respectfully ask you reject the rezoning because they cannot double dip. They should have to provide either transitional buffering, which is going to greatly impact what they can do there. They're not going to be able to get this outrageous 40-unit density. They're going to have to peel it back because they're going to have to meet what the city code expects for there to be between two competing districts, R15 and a more intense O&I that they're seeking. There should be buffering, and they're trying to work the system to get around the buffering, which you'll hear a little bit more about with Ms. Hughes. So for those reasons, we're not opposed to the development. Build you some patio homes. Why does it have to be 40? Why can't it be 14 patio homes and duplexes? That's missing middle housing, because that's what's more consistent and more harmonious with what's adjacent to that property for this neighborhood. This neighborhood has been there for a long time. And I'll end with this. Across the street, you talk about the O&I and the multifamily. All of those properties are surrounded by 60-foot right-of-ways. That's what is supposed to happen, not a narrow alley. And on top of that, the commercial is not 40 feet in the air. It's not 45 feet. It's at most 20 feet when you're talking about the bank on the corner. So for those reasons and the reasons you hear tonight, we would ask that this council consider the pending zoning determination letter and the very real problems with the technical issues as a reason to deny it, but also because of the fact that it's not consistent and does not provide adequate buffering for the residents in this neighborhood. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Christine Hughes, and my husband and I wasn't going to get emotional tonight, but sorry. My husband and I reside at 1843 Hawthorne Road. Some of you may know that I've stood at this podium many times to address City Council as a member of City's planning staff. But tonight I'm here representing myself and my neighbors. Tonight I stand before you just as Christine, a resident, to ask you to consider not only my own voice, but that of the community. I've known Mr. Petrino for a long time. I don't think he's a bad person. I know he's unafraid of a challenge and that he can be creative when the need arises. So tonight I'm here to ask him to get a little bit more creative. I've also known most of your planning staff for a long time. It's the reason I moved to Wilmington was to become a member of the planning staff. I'm here to challenge them to consider all of the comprehensive plan policies and not just cherry pick a few. I was, in fact, the primary author of the city's comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2016. And over the course of my career working for the city on small area plans, as well as a comprehensive plan, I met with thousands of city residents, asking them, what do you love about our city? What needs to change? What should we preserve? What do you cherish? What do we keep? In fact, Dylan Lee, who's here tonight, and I spent hours at Independence Mall one day walking around asking people, what's the best thing about Wilmington? And we got answers ranging from bunny rabbits to, I wish we had a Red Lobster. I've heard it all. But the thing that never, ever changed is that people love their neighborhoods. They love our community. This is a great place to live, and people want to be here. Across all the neighborhoods in our city, across all age ranges of citizens, Wilmingtonians want their homes and their neighborhoods to be protected, no matter what that neighborhood looks like.
We heard it over and over again that single-family neighborhoods should be protected. Tonight, I, along with many of my neighbors, stand before you asking you to protect our neighborhood from incompatible development. I was incredibly disappointed to hear two members of the Planning Commission state that they believe the comprehensive plan actually recommends this exact proposed development, when in fact there are so many policies with which it is in conflict. And I'm not sure why, but the planning staff report provided to the Planning Commission and now to you, City Council, wholly fails to identify any of the policies with which the proposal is in conflict. We worked so hard to collect and accurately embody the feedback of the community in the plan's policies. And for some reason, it's been disregarded, and I can't account for that. When the City Council votes on this request, Mr. Mayor, you will be mandated by the state of North Carolina to sign a consistency statement indicating that, in fact, what you're voting on is consistent with the comprehensive plan. But I do not believe you've had the full picture presented to you to make such a decision. For example, the comprehensive plan statement include a rich mix of uses, limit single-family development with large building footprints, got a big blue up arrow. Where's the rich mix of uses? There's 2,200 square feet of non-residential space in this proposal. These buildings have huge footprints. They're very tall, taller than anything immediately around them. There's mere token non-residential square footage, and it's really hard to understand how that represents a big blue up arrow. This site is very clearly excluded from the high-density transition designation. This site is part of a neighborhood. The plan is not parcel-specific, and instead asks you to consider the bigger picture when making these kinds of decisions. Please consider the incredible number of recently completed, under construction, and approved or under review plans for apartments, townhomes, houses just like this along Independence Boulevard. Please, let's take a deep breath before we dive right back in. Some of you were sitting on the City Council when the city initiated the creation of a new zoning district, then known as the Oleander Transition District, for that stretch of Oleander Drive between Pine Grove and Wallace Avenue. It was recognized that that stretch of Oleander was no longer suitable for single-family dwellings as it once was. During the development of those regulations, now called the Residential Office District, the residents of Pine Street, parallel to Oleander Drive, were adamant that the alley access not be allowed once a property transitioned from single-family use. They were adamant that the quality of life in their neighborhood be protected and maintained. And council acted accordingly, prohibiting alley access. And the code as it stands today prohibits motor vehicle access to the alley for the lots along the north side of Oleander Drive that are converted to non-residential use or are redeveloped. That same consideration and protection now needs to be extended to the residents of Hawthorne Road who back up to this alley. Alleys are exempted from the definition of rights-of-way, and that was intentional. That's because the alley is intended to provide a rear service access to these uses. It is not intended to function as a primary point of ingress and egress. The new land development code includes a lot of protections for single-family developments, but somehow this project has escaped applying any of them, it seems. I'm very concerned about the lack of setback, buffers, and building step back between the mixed-use building at the corner and the adjacent residential development, which is part of a historic neighborhood. Although the proposed buildings would not exceed the by right height, why can we not consider applying the building step-back standards found in Section 18-73 so that the building is lower in height, closest to the single family existing to the west, and then taller towards the intersection? That, along with a fair setback from the property line of at least 20 feet, would do much to improve the protection of the single-family development, as recommended by the plan and required by general code standards. There's been a lot of discussion about missing middle housing. This site could be a great place to infill with some missing middle housing, and an opportunity for members of our neighborhood who wish to age in place, stay in our neighborhoods as they outgrow larger homes on larger lots. But before deciding if this is missing middle housing, we need to understand what that really means. It's not just a term that we throw out. It's a concept developed by Daniel Paralek. He describes missing middle housing as a diverse provision of housing options that are house-scaled buildings house-scaled buildings that fit seamlessly into existing residential neighborhoods, seamlessly. Then support walkability, locally serving retail, and public transportation options. They provide solutions along a spectrum of affordability to address the mismatch between the available housing stock and shifting demographics, combined with a growing demand for walkability. Please raise your hand if you enjoy walking down Oleander Drive. There is a scale for what is considered missing middle based on location and context. You don't just slap any old housing type down on the ground and call it missing middle and walk away. This can range from detached single-family houses and then scale up to duplexes, and from there to the cottage court or patio home type of housing. You can't skip straight to multiplex and townhouse and say, I've met the mark, and call it a day. What's been proposed is clearly vastly different from the adjacent residential and not exactly house-scaled. A series of side-by-side duplexes or stacked duplexes or cottage court development could fairly be considered missing middle housing at this particular location. There's a well-known illustration, I saw it on the screen tonight, by Opticos Design that shows how missing middle housing scales up and scales down depending on the context of the site. I provided the clerk with some copies of that image for her to share with you this evening. I encourage anyone who is interested in learning more about missing middle housing to visit missingmiddlehousing.com to learn more. The fact is, the development type proposed here is no longer missing from Wilmington. We've been building lots and lots and lots of apartments over the past 10 years, and less mid-density housing. The CDMU regulations have been a point of contention in Wilmington since I got here about 20 years ago. The intent was great: allow some apartments to go in over retail uses. That way residents are close enough to their daily needs to get what they need without getting in the car, and businesses have a sort of built-in customer base. Fantastic concept. But the rules as they are written allow a developer to skirt around the multifamily regulations under the pretense of building a development, while essentially a mixed-use development, while essentially avoiding that whole idea of the provision of daily needs component. I ask you to consider what daily needs may be met by you, me, or anyone else in 2,000 square feet of non-residential use. The RB zoned apartment complex or development behind the Harris Teeter building along Park Avenue, I submit to you, is actually a really great example of CDMU. I believe it's called the Helmsman, but don't quote me on that. Those residents do not have to cross Oleander Drive to reach a grocery store, and there are a number of active ground floor uses. Most of the parking is tucked away behind the building between the backside of the grocery store and the apartment buildings, and I think it actually looks really good. It's a really great marriage of residential and commercial uses. Comprehensive Plan Policy 1.1.2 says all conditions proposed as part of a land use decision should be consistent with the comprehensive plan, including the growth strategies map. The staff report presented to you today has no site-specific conditions at all. It doesn't mention the bus stop getting fixed up. It doesn't mention improvements to the alley. Yes, we're going to hang our hat on the site plan that's been presented to you, but it's lacking, the conditions are lacking. Policy 1.4.2 says that new commercial development should be properly managed through the use of development regulations, the development review process, and other tools. The intent is to avoid, this is directly from the comprehensive plan, the intent is to avoid unreasonable impacts such as traffic, parking, litter, shadow, light, view obstruction, odor, noise, or vibration impacts on nearby residential areas. You can't get more nearby than this. Policy 1.7.5 says historic and unique neighborhoods. This is arguably one of the most unique neighborhoods in town, with an abundance of desired character, should be protected and conserved through the use of zoning, reinvestment, and other tools. 1.7.10 says infill sites within existing neighborhoods should be developed consistently with the design elements of nearby structures and in a manner that enhances or improves the character of the area. Please remember that this piece of land, although vacant, has been a part of the Live Oak Plaza neighborhood since the 1930s. In summary, what's proposed fails to meet many of the comprehensive plan policies. It fails to meet the intention of the CDMU provisions. It fails to meet the intent of exempting the alley from the right-of-way standards. It is not missing middle housing, and it certainly does not reflect the citizens' preferences captured over many years of collecting public input. And it does not benefit the city as a whole, as it really should. I think there's a better outcome for all of us. The challenge for Wilmington is, and will continue to be, how do we balance the need for increased housing supply, neighborhood commerce, and the need to protect desired neighborhood character, preserve historic resources, and protect the natural environment with the demand for housing? There are no easy answers left in Wilmington. We're 90% built out, and the edges like this will always be the hardest. I do not envy your job tonight, or any night, honestly. I know you'll do your best. I know our city staff is doing their best. They're underpaid, they're overworked, and they're understaffed. I do not envy my former colleagues. They are going to have to continue to sort through questions like this for as long as they're with the city. This doesn't have to be a winner-take-all scenario, though. There could be a benefit for the developer and for the people who already live in this area. Please, if you must approve a rezoning here, condition the approval to a lesser density, require a transitional buffer, require setbacks that genuinely protect the existing residential development, and protect the quality of life, the character of this historic neighborhood. And also please consider requiring a building step back nearest to the alley so that the upper floors of the buildings are farther away from the single-family homes behind them. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Just state your name. I know you are Vinton, but state your name for the record where you live.
will.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right. My name is Vinton Fountain. I live at 2909 Hydrangea Place. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. And likewise, thank you for what you do. I know it's not easy. I'm opposing the rezoning, but I'm not opposing growth. I've known many of you for a long time, and I've worked for economic development for some 41 years. Smart growth and having the kind of impact we all want in this community. So it's something I'm familiar with. But what I think about is, I mean, we're very fortunate, right? We have a lot of opportunities. It's hard. I mean, it's hard work. I mean, I'm thinking about our staff and how we need to have, you know, uniform codes and mixed-use development rules and a lot of mechanisms to try to process what's coming at us. And it's extensive. So that's why we're here tonight. And what I'd like to say is I've seen some of these projects across town, and they look good, okay? I've seen some infill projects on Riceville Avenue and different places. They're smaller. They have access. It doesn't have the complexity of this site, and they look good. So I understand. We need some of this, if not a lot of it, and certainly density is a part of our plan. It's just not this site. It's not this site. And that's why we're here, because our elected officials are the final say between the citizens and all of our technical components and our community to say, yes, this either goes or doesn't go. And so I know all of you are very proud of where we live, and I'm proud, and the people here are proud. So we're here tonight to say, make us proud. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jim Bryan, and I live at 1202 Essex Drive, and I've been there a little over 30 years, I think. Do you all mind pulling up the zoning map that the applicant provided? Mr. Waddell made an interesting comment, and it's actually what I want to speak about this evening. If you look at that MD17 over there, that's Oleander Court. It was built in the 40s. It is 7 buildings, 92 total units. And so look at that tract of land compared to what we're talking about putting 40 units on tonight. And consider that That MD-17 is surrounded by Live Oak Parkway, Hawthorne Road, Mayfair Drive, and Oleander, with access from the development on 3 low-traffic streets with 1 high-traffic Oleander there. It is a safe environment. It has got good green space. It's got good spacing. But more importantly, it's 2 stories. Traditional architecture consistent with the neighborhood. The applicant's project has 1 street in its independence. It's using an alley as a buffer rather than the 60-foot street buffer, which is a concern, but more concerning to me is that it is 3 and 4 stories. So if you take an overhead view of what a 4-story building is like looking into the backyards of their neighbors, that always considered behind them to be R15, it is dramatically different than what any homeowner expected when they bought that property. And I think that's the biggest concern. The question that was asked that made me go look at that development, it was asked by the Planning Commission themselves, by one of the commissioners, why are you opposed to multifamily when you've got multifamily sitting across the street at Oleander Court? And so I went and rode around it and looked at it and said, well, why am I opposed to it when I've got that in my backyard? Well, I would suggest that if the proposal was more conducive to the neighborhood and consistent with the neighborhood the way Oleander Court is, you wouldn't have this uproar behind you. I think the biggest issue here is it's not consistent with neighborhood. It's not about multifamily, it's not about development, it's about inconsistency with the neighborhood and not protecting the residents that are already there. I have one more quick point to make. Christine said something about all the multifamily around. We did go take a look at how many developments were around a 2-mile radius around this property, and there are already 6,395 units with another 895 units being developed of multifamily properties within 2 miles of this site. So there is a lot of activity going on, and why do we have to overdevelop a site that really is going to be difficult to manage from an ingress-egress standpoint and with such tall structures sitting in the middle of the neighborhood? Thank you.
Good evening. Don Betts, 2518 Park Avenue, 50 years, and a few years sitting up there with you folks. So I've got several pages, but in the interest of time, we'll keep it short, Mayor. An ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone R15 property that has had that designation for more than 65 plus years, property that is in fact eligible to build homes on, as many as 12 units according to the city staff. The prior owners of 60 plus years chose not to build upon it, instead holding it as green space or a buffer between the intense traffic on what is now 7 lanes of Independence Boulevard at the intersections and a very significant major north-south route. In fact, they were so sensitive that they built their own office on what would be a very attractive corner, commercial corner, but they built their office for low, tense traffic for the neighborhood. And not only did they protect this a couple of acres or more, the family donated 120 acres to New Hanover County as green space 100 years ago. So it runs in their blood. So the question before you, basically, tonight, is the rezone or not? It is that simple. The city staff has received the request from the new owner, has done their professional due diligence to accommodate the application and make a staff recommendation to the Planning Commission and then ultimately to you, the City Council. That is why I, in a a few neighbors in the community of mine are here tonight to express our desire to leave the property as zoned for the allowable units. There continues to be demand for these allowable units. Within the community, new homes have been built on vacant lots on Arden and Country Club. Smaller ranch-style homes from the 50s and the 60s have been removed and replaced with more modern houses on both Mimosa and Country Club. In fact, several new homes are being built behind Country Club and Spofford Mills. If one reviews the aerial diagram on page 1 of the case summary, the crosshatch area, it reveals, as they say in real estate, rooftops, rooftops, and rooftops for blocks and blocks, designated R15 zoning, all the way to the railroad tracks. They go north. Attempting to rezone an R15 parcel within the established long-term zoning ordinances designated by the city for years and years really borders on questionable spot zoning. And the R15 designation is in place to the north for quite a distance, as well as to the south with viable neighborhoods. You need to look at the big picture, that one, rooftops everywhere. Thus, I urge you not to set a precedence by changing just clearly residential zoning designation to O&I. The comprehensive plan is just that, a plan. However, the official zoning map of the city and its ordinances are legal documents to be defended in court if necessary. As members of the community at large and city council members, it is your decision to approve the changes to the ordinance or not. I would suggest a motion to deny the rezoning request, and I thank you for your time.
Council members, my name is John Lovett. Since 1988, I've lived at 2610 Park Avenue in the Oleander neighborhood of Midtown. My house sits on Alley 68, as identified on the Wilmington GIS map. Like Alley 65, which is the alley in question for development and improvement, Alley 68 is managed by the city and maintained by the city. I come to you with many years of personal experience on the aspects of working with the city and the aspects of managing the alleys in my neighborhood. But I'm also here in that context to ask a question about what I believe is an overlooked aspect of the proposed high-density development. And I believe this question has community-wide ramifications. Some specifics. The proposed high-density multifamily and commercial development that will follow this rezoning request includes improvements along the length of Alley 65 that adjoins the adjacent property, the applicant's property. Alley 65, like all the alleys in the Oleander neighborhood, currently provide for one-way travel. The proposed improvements include pavement and header, improved drainage, and enlargement of the city-owned right-of-way from 15 to 25 feet. These improvements will produce a two-way pattern of traffic, and it will be, in the future, fall under the city and be maintained by the city. Concerned citizens have raised the question of the need for traffic impact analysis for the overall development. And my emphasis is on overall development. Page 19 of the case summary addresses the data generated by the staff that indicates a TIA for the overall development is not necessary. I have reviewed, I understand their conclusions about there not needing to be a TIA, and I understand and accept their overall points. But consider the following. If you look at the site plan, you'll notice or will see that the alley improvements will provide access to the 16 three-bedroom townhomes that will join the new two-way segment of the alley. The townhomes according to page 9 of the case summary, will have 40 parking spaces. Currently, Alley 65 has driveways for 4 of the houses that front on Hawthorne Road to the west. The remaining 1/3 of the alley that does not abut the development will also, in addition, remain one-way. I put forth to the members of the council that most and quite possibly all of the 40 vehicles targeted for the townhome parking spaces will choose to exit their property to a surrounding roadway by way of the new and improved passage. Vehicles from the 40 parking spaces proposed in the core center of the development may also find the new improved alleyway attractive. And particularly if you look at the site plan, you'll notice that the majority of the parking spaces are actually closer to the alley and the Oleander Drive egress than they are to the Independence passage. The existing Oleander Drive is remarkably close to one of the busiest intersections in Wilmington, and all of these cars will be exiting there. I put forth that the Wilmington GIS maps indicates that Oleander is a NCDOT roadway, and so my question to the council, has the DOT been approached about the safety of the proximity of the improved alley exit onto Oleander so close to the intersection? And if so, do they not believe that as such, egress from this high-density development into the major byway at such a location, so close to major intersection, poses a safety risk to any in Wilmington who pass that way? If they have not been asked, I query why. Thank you.
Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk, I'm sure we probably exceeded the time frame, but could you, what is the time frame?
Yes, sir. You have exceeded the 30 minutes, which ended at 8, and the last 3 speakers have had their 3 minutes plus an extra 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna add an additional 10, and then I'll cut it at that. And please keep, if you could, your comments down to about 3 minutes. So if you want to speak, I wanted to hear from you. So come on through and just set it at 10 and make sure, wave a flag so I can see you.
Thank you very much. Honorable council members,
This is just the public hearing. Excuse me, just so I'm answering a question here. After the public hearing is closed, or then Mr. Frank will have an opportunity to come up and speak in regards to some of the issues that have been posed here tonight.
There are people out there that would like to speak in favor of it.
We have 10 minutes, so
People tell me
yeah, we have additional 10 minutes so you can speak. So, Mr. Keith, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Robert Keith. I reside at 1633 Country Club Road. Honorable council members, thank you very much for your attention and especially for your service to our city. Thank you. I have a fundamental belief that our representative government system works and that our elected leaders will act with honesty, integrity, and good faith, and ultimately they will support the wishes of the majority of their constituents. I am not anti-development, and neither are the other people in our group. We are simply opposed to the specific development in this application. I believe in property owners' rights, but I do not believe that citizens at large should be burdened in any way to help a single property owner maximize the value of their property. I'm going to skip some, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip some other things that I thought I'd talk about, and I'd like to go straight to an issue that I think is very important. And it's the subject of representation and advocacy in this process for average citizens. Who represents the average citizen? Throughout the process, the deck is clearly stacked in favor of professional developers, land planners, consultants, and attorneys, and is designed, not necessarily intentionally, to limit input and influence from concerned citizens. A description of the process a little bit and why it's not equitable. A developer may spend weeks or months or even a year, as they mentioned, working closely with planning staff to develop their project. No problem with that process. But a citizen only has days, possibly, to react or to even know that something like this is coming for them. So I think it's unfair. they may be invited to a neighborhood meeting, which is required, which precedes a planning commission hearing in which they have 15 minutes to make their case only. So one party has months or years, the other one has 15 minutes. It's just not equitable. A developer also has the advantage of professional experience, is familiar with the process, and can focus their full time and attention on that process. They understand technical language, codes, and all those things that go with it. An average citizen has no working knowledge of this process. They frequently cannot decipher the complicated technical language and related codes and policies. They really have no advocate. A developer has significant financial resources, allowing them to employ experienced attorneys, expert witnesses, consultants, and experienced staff. An average citizen cannot afford to pay professionals to help them understand pages and pages of applications, supporting documents, land development codes, TRC, BOA, TIA, and on and on and on. To the developer, it's simply about dollars and cents, and that is completely understandable. They're entrepreneurs, they're trying to make money, and nobody has a problem with that. To planning staff and planning commissioners, it's about code and technical specifications and subjective interpretation of a general planning document. So where is the human aspect considered and the implications for existing residents and taxpayers? These are real people and not just a statistic or someone to be sacrificed in the name of growth and progress. For existing residents, it's about raising their children in a safe place and the right to some reasonable level of privacy and quiet enjoyment. It's about their life savings and maybe their retirement fund from equity in their house. At some point in this process, they deserve to be heard and represented. If not you, our elected leaders, then who is listening to them and advocating for them? I respectfully ask that you vote no to this application and show your constituents that they do have a voice. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. Just so that the speaker will know, there's only 5 minutes and 59 seconds left.
I'll be brief. Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. My name is Dan Monk. I live at 1224 Country Club Road. I think you've heard a lot of the points. I'd like to just review a few. I started out of college. My first job was as a traffic engineer. So I tend to look at traffic pretty well. It was in telephony, but traffic is traffic, whether it be a roadside intersection, which is a switch to me. The second half of my career was in sales to bureaucracies, if you will, Southern Bell. So I understand when people have been using terms like transitional zoning, workforce housing, comp plan. This is how you sell to somebody. You use their terms, and that's what we've all heard. That doesn't make it real. It makes it, that's just I'm trying to sell you, and that's the problem with it. A lot of the applicants' sell has no substance, and that's really what you've heard from some of the experts this evening. One of the things, looking at traffic, listening to your engineers from Monday morning's meeting with you, a TIA was not felt to be required, understood. But that engineer also said quite clearly that the location of the lot for this proposal definitely will have a traffic impact. He was not concerned about it because he says, well, there's alternatives. Well, unfortunately, I live in Midtown. I don't like being the alternative. All right, that's just the way it is. Where Independence is a very strong density property, highway, Midtown is a 25-mile-an-hour properties. It is not meant for traffic. So, a real key point, when someone brings you a problem, they should bring a solution. Looking at this, there is one pony in the pile, I think, of looking at this all over, and that is the alleyway. If, just for concept-wise, if you were to consider a lower density, 8 properties, more patio homes, but something lower, cut off all access to Independence Drive, enhance the alleyway from Oleander all the way to Park, that access lot would get access to the world through that. Several things would happen. your alleyway would be complete, problems would be fixed, and that alleyway has issues. I think we all know that. The intersection and Independence would not be impacted at all. A major, major switching node in the city. You do not mess with that. And last but not least, you do not have the step function of four-story buildings next to cottages. Is much more transitional. Everybody gets something. The applicant gets to sell his properties. But in the zoning, he bought it for. He paid $400,000 for a good reason. Everybody knows that was R15. Thank you. I believe the young lady behind me would like to speak a little bit.
Hold on. Is there anybody in the audience who wants to speak in favor of this item? Because I've been, okay, come on.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. I think maybe the one thing that we can all agree on in this room is that it's freezing in here, so I apologize if my voice is shaking a little bit. My name is Liz Carbone, and I'm here tonight to represent the Cape Fear Housing Coalition. We represent over 100 local businesses, nonprofit service providers, nonprofit developers, healthcare providers, and concerned citizens, not just in Wilmington, but across the Cape Fear region. And some may wonder why the Housing Coalition is supporting this project tonight. And we could point to the need for missing middle housing opportunities as the findings in the Bowen report, the desperate need for more opportunities to become a homeowner, best practices to increase density in areas like this that does have walkability to retail, to grocery stores, to public parks, and employment opportunities, and the alignment with the arduous but good and important work done by our city's planning staff on the comprehensive plan. And just as an aside to the gentleman who said that there's no person speaking for the people in this process, I have to say that the city staff is that voice. They work hard, thanklessly, in an unbiased capacity to do that review. So they should get their kudos for being that voice. And lastly, talking about, again, why we're here as the Housing Coalition, you've heard all the good points that have been made regarding density, regarding the need for homeowner opportunities, but there really is something bigger at play here than just this one development being proposed tonight. And again, while this project isn't the typical deeply affordable project that we support, the Housing Coalition at its heart is about one overarching sentiment, and that is a right-sized, right-priced housing opportunity for everyone. Our desire for every one of our neighbors to have the success and opportunity, the health and well-being that a home provides, doesn't stop for us at 100% AMI. We truly do wish the same for each person in this room as we do for our lowest income neighbors. And that's the sentiment that honestly feels absent from this room tonight. Many community members say, well, of course I support my housing being built, and I recognize that there's a need, but just don't build it near me. And well, when we all say that, we just run out of places to put things real quick. And for those lucky few of us that own a home that we can afford, I'm here to tell you that every time you sit in traffic on Market or Dawson Street, every time your favorite local business reduces their hours or has to close completely due to staffing concerns, every time it's overcrowded, you too are the victim of our housing shortage. I'm here to represent our Housing Coalition, but this is overcrowded. You too are the victim of our housing shortage. I'm here to represent our Housing Coalition, but this is personal to me too. I moved to victim of our housing shortage. I'm here to represent our Housing Coalition, but this is personal to me too. I moved here 13 years ago and I choose Wilmington every day. Despite it's overcrowded, you too are the victim of our housing shortage. I'm here to represent our Housing Coalition, but this is personal to me too. I moved here 13 years ago and I choose Wilmington every day, despite its challenges, as the place victim of our housing shortage. I'm here to represent our Housing Coalition, but this is personal to me too. I moved here 13 years ago and I choose Wilmington every day, despite its challenges, as the place where my husband and I will spend the rest of our lives, as the place where it's overcrowded. You too are the victim of our housing shortage. I'm here to represent our Housing Coalition, but this is personal to me too. I moved here 13 years ago and I choose Wilmington every day, despite its challenges, as the place where my husband and I will spend the rest of our lives, as the place where we'll start a family, and where we can meaningfully contribute to our community in whatever ways we can. And for me, and for our Housing Coalition, we want to live in a community where we expend our time and our financial resources on tutoring kids, on feeding the hungry, not hiring costly attorneys and scheduling meetings just to ensure someone can't live near us. I want to raise my children in a community where success and opportunity is wanted for our neighbors just as much as we want it for ourselves. And my hope is that other people in this room feel that way too. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak in favor? Because we want to make sure that everybody had an opportunity. Time up, time up, time up, time up, up.
Yes, sir, time is up.
Okay, very good. I'll get to that in a second. I believe, Mr. Frank, you were going to come up and answer some of the questions that these folks have posed to the council.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to do so. There's a pretty broad range of concerns raised both in the comments that have been provided to you leading up to tonight's hearing and also in the spoken comments that individuals chose to share this evening. I'm going to do my best to respond to each of those. In some cases, I'll need to do so generally, just in the interest of time. Please, if there's anything that you read or that you heard that raises a question for you that you feel like I have not addressed, I encourage you to ask me. I'm eager, most importantly, to address the concerns that arise for each of the 7 of you. What did we hear? Staff got it wrong. Not on this site. Think about my view. Lower buildings would be better. This is too much height. We'd much rather see this land stay R15. Mrs. Hughes absolutely deserves our gratitude and respect. Several years of really good service to this city. She trained several of the people who participated in evaluating this case tonight. She also lives very close to this site and feels very passionately about what should and should not happen there. You received a letter in support from another former staff member, Jeff Walton. I hope that you all had an opportunity to review that. Mr. Walton does not live nearby, is an objective outside observer, but cared enough about this case to take the time to write to you and tell you what he felt about it. Your most significant guideposts in connection with this rezoning are the best interest of the city as a whole, as set forth in the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and as evaluated by the thorough, unbiased, expert evaluation of city staff. In this case, those guideposts could not be more clear. Citizens who chose to write to you or speak to you have asked you to substitute their clearly biased opinions for staff's thoughtful analysis. Some have blatantly told you that they feel entitled to an undeveloped 2-acre buffer and that their objective is to do anything that they can to prevent this landowner from building on his land. Others have attacked the staff's assessments in an effort to discredit the professionals who serve the city, and others still have advocated that this land should stay R15. In the face of all of that, we can all be grateful that these legislative decisions are entrusted to your reasonable judgment, and that none of us are subjected to a process that requires the popular vote of our neighbors to allow us to build something on our land. Could you cue up my presentation, please, sir? I'd like to speak briefly about the concept of keep it R15 is a better solution than what we've proposed here. The land's currently zoned R15, straight R15, which means the parameters for what one can do there are controlled by the parameters in our code. A rezoning is an evolution of land use restrictions applicable to a site. So in order to evaluate whether a rezoning makes sense or not, you have to look at the parameters that are permitted under the current zoning versus the parameters that are proposed by the proposed zoning. In this case, the image on the bottom right of the screen is the conditional site plan that's been proposed in connection with this rezoning. The image that's on the top left of the screen is our best effort to show what the law requires for these sites to be developed if they're developed as R15 lots. As you can see, there's a significant difference between the two. Same concept here, but in 3D. The image on the left shows the proposed development rendered in 3 dimensions, consistent with the conditions that have been proposed. And the image on the right shows what would be permitted by law if one were to simply divide those lots, sell them off a couple at a time, and build single-family R15 homes upon them. If you do so, each lot is allowed to have a home and an accessory dwelling unit. An accessory dwelling unit can be 5 feet off of the rear property line. The home and the accessory dwelling unit are controlled by a 35-foot height restriction. That height restriction is measured to the middle of the roof pitch. Just another rendering showing what would be permitted, again, within the parameters of the law. This is not a proposed development or a proposed building plan. This is our best effort to show you what it could look like under the parameters that are required today. As you can see, the existing alley is relatively narrow. Accessory dwelling unit close to it puts a structure in this location substantially closer to the existing homes on the west side of the property than what we've proposed. Furthermore, subdivision of the land into lots for R15 development doesn't require any tree preservation at all, where what we've proposed to you today, the conditional zoning that we've proposed, requires significant tree preservation and mitigation, not to mention the developer's sincere and deep wish to preserve trees where he can. As you know, the site includes several tall existing trees today. Proposed development is also subject to very specific conditions. It includes intentional and design points of ingress and egress, and more substantial prescribed setbacks and buffers than contemplated in the law applicable to the R15 zoning today. Here's a similar image to the one I showed you a moment ago, similar cross-section. You can see not only does widening the alley increase the distance between the structure and the existing homes, but you also have a greater setback from the edge of that alley to the townhomes, and you have the preservation of the trees that are shown in the image there, all contributing to a much more harmonious development of this land than would be permitted by R15 today. Here's those images side by side, or excuse me, one on top of the other. The one on top is what's allowed under the code as it exists today. The one on the bottom is what's contemplated in this proposed development and conditional zoning. Heard some comments about height. As I mentioned, several folks mentioned that it would be better to see patio homes or two-story structures or the like. What's lost in that comment is when you go wider as opposed to taller, you eliminate more trees. So the opportunity to preserve open space on the land, and specifically to preserve significant trees on the land, is much greater with taller structures. That's exactly why staff encouraged us to include a multifamily building that was 4 stories tall rather than 3, so that we could compress that footprint. But let's talk about what the height actually means. So in the ONI, the height restriction is 45 feet. There's a carve-out that allows you to go higher than 45 feet if you're a certain distance set back from the sides of the property. This site is too narrow. It's not wide enough to take advantage in any way of that additional height restriction. So the height restriction applicable here is 45 feet. One of the conditions that's been proposed by staff that the applicant has agreed to is that development has to be materially consistent with the site plan and with the elevations. What that means is that 4-story multifamily building has to be a flat roof building, as we've represented to staff and to the city. The building on the left side of the screen, Mayor Pro Tem, is the multifamily building. It's difficult to see on the very right, but sorry, Dylan, could you help? The numbers on the very right side of the screen there are the actual heights. As you can see, the 45-foot tall flat roof building is 45 feet tall. The building in the middle is the townhome building. The height of that is roughly 40 feet to the peak, maybe slightly higher, depending on how the roof heights are, interior ceiling heights are. And then the one on the right is what's permitted by right today. So if you do a 2-story old colonial house, you put a typical sloped roof on it, you end up with a roof peak that's about 42 feet. What's my point in showing you this? We're not talking about a height that is substantially different in any way than what's permitted today. The comparison need not be to existing structures that are located nearby. The comparison here is what height is permitted by the current zoning regulations. I mentioned already tree preservation and don't need to tap on that any further. Glad to answer questions if you have any. From a stormwater management perspective, there were comments that I read from those concerned citizens who chose to write them in about flooding. Note that if you divide this land into 7 lots with R15 development, you don't have any stormwater controls. If you do approve the zoning this evening, not only do you have stormwater controls designed to treat stormwater from the new homes on this site, but you also have stormwater controls designed to treat stormwater from the alley. We've explained to you already how we intend to handle that, which we believe is an attractive and effective solution. All right. Bear with me. I'm skipping over things that weren't specifically addressed in the hearing tonight so that I don't belabor the topic any longer than need be. The neighborhood is the last thing that I'd like to talk about. There were multiple comments written to you and that you heard this evening about how it's necessary and appropriate to match these structures to the neighborhood. We couldn't agree more. That's a fundamental aspect of the comprehensive plan. That's something that's been very well evaluated by staff and something that we've worked closely with staff for a significant period of time to make sure that we're achieving. Those that have advocated inconsistency with the neighborhood are encouraging you to consider the neighborhood as being bounded by Oleander on the south and Independence on the east. That's not how this works, and it's not how it should work. If we look at neighborhoods as being bounded by roadways, and don't take advantage of opportunities to integrate uses across neighborhoods, we fail in our fundamental objective in planning for the city. This neighborhood is the neighborhood that's centered on Oleander and Independence. One important and fantastic aspect of that neighborhood is the lower density residential homes that are located in the northwest corner of that intersection. Other aspects of that neighborhood include the Independence Mall, which will be redeveloped in time in some way or fashion pursuant probably to the RB district that it's in. The other areas of the neighborhood include the commercial and multifamily uses on the east side of Independence from the site, and the commercial multifamily uses located on the south side of Oleander from the subject site. That's all that I want to say specifically in response to the comments that were submitted and that you heard this evening, though once again, I would welcome the opportunity to answer any questions that you may have for me.
Any questions, Council? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll be nearby should you need me during your deliberations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any additional questions of staff? Any other questions in respect to this? Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it was mentioned streetscape requirements and the alley. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, sir, Mr. Barnett. Excuse me. The streetscape requirement is required along right-of-ways within the city. Within the city's code, under the definitions, an alley is not defined as a right-of-way, therefore the streetscape is not required along that portion. Additionally, there was a mention of buffering as well. Buffering goes to property line boundaries of differing intensities of zoning districts. In this case, the zoning district boundary goes to the center line of the alley, not to an adjacent property. So therefore, on a technicality, a transitional buffer would not be required as well. Of course, council has the ability to condition anything above and beyond the landscaping requirements of the code, but that's just how the code reads in this case.
So if we said, okay, have them buffer it or whatever, what would that do to this plan? What would happen?
There would be a planting requirement if you were to require that transitional buffer for properties adjacent to R15 zoning. If it were to be zoned O&I, would require a type B buffer. which is between 15 or 20 feet wide, depending on their two different options. One including a fence, which would be the 15-foot wide buffer. The other one just requiring plantings, which would be a 20-foot wide buffer.
And I guess to the, yes, answer that for me, please, applicant.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Could that happen?
The reason that buffers aren't required along rights-of-way is because this property, just like the lots on the west side, use the right-of-way for access. And so you can't effectively incorporate a buffer where you have all the driveway cuts approaching the alley. In this case, each of the townhomes has a driveway on the alley, and of course you've got the primary point of access on the alley as well. And so the concept of a buffer, as I agree with Mr. Mahoney's interpretation of it, it's not required along a right-of-way, including an alley, for good reason. And I don't think it'd be realistic to incorporate that type of buffer here. Now, that said, if specifically with regard to the multifamily building, what's described as Building A on this image, and the length of alley between the corner of Oleander and the alley and the primary entrance into the development, that is going to be screened. It's going to be screened with new landscape efforts and the like. If you were inclined to incorporate a condition to require us to either include a certain percentage of opaque fence or landscaping in that area to achieve a visual buffer from the alleyway, that's something that we could accommodate as an additional condition.
Because he did mention a fence, right? You mentioned the fence as a buffer.
You could,
Good.
yes.
Okay.
That's probably the less desirable of the two alternatives. So if we
Okay.
accept that as a condition, I'd like the option to either incorporate landscaping or a fence, but yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Rivenbar?
I'd like, I don't need to speak to you, Mr. Frank.
Thank you.
I'd just like somebody at the table over there to come up and respond to Ms. Hughes' speech. Not necessarily point by point, but I'd like somebody to come up and respond to that. All of you, or one of you, or whatever.
Happy to do so. And I think, I've worked with Ms. Hughes for quite a while, and I think she said it best when, I think she said something along the lines of the edges are the most difficult spots. And I think she hit the nail on the head there. This is on the edge. And, when we look and evaluate the plans as they come in, we look for the level of consistency with the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan, which she's very familiar with, was a plan that was put together through, probably years of input from citizens within the community. And when we looked at this submittal, when it came in, we evaluated the need for housing within the community, within the area, the consistency with the surrounding zoning districts, the proximity to higher intensity commercial uses, the ability, to walk to a grocery store, things of that nature. So all of those things were evaluated when staff received the proposal and did their analysis of the project.
That's all you can say. I mean, she talked for 30 minutes and was very specific in some of the things that she had, that she brought to us. And I know that these comprehensive plans, they're living, breathing documents. They change, they slip, they slide. But I just want, I have great faith in what you do, Ms. Painter, Mr. Chambers, and to see something that comes along it's like looking at a ball on a table and one side's white and this side's black and I can't see the white side and they can't see the black side. Is that kind of what we're talking about here? I mean, it looks as though we've got a couple of different interpretations of that comprehensive plan. Would you agree with that?
I think that would be fair, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Waddell?
This is a question for staff. I heard it referenced a few times in some of the commentary from a couple of citizens that the alleyway improvements weren't listed as conditions. Are they listed as conditions, and if not, why?
Yes, Mr. Waddell, there were a few items that were mentioned, and I believe Ms. Hughes mentioned a few as well. The alleyway, the bus stop, the transit stop location, those are all code requirements which are standard, so we wouldn't necessarily condition code requirements as part of the conditions of approval outlined in the case summary.
So they'll be, should this move forward, they would be required per the code?
Correct.
And there's no two ways about that?
Correct.
Okay. And that's bus stop, alleyway improvement. What were a couple of the others? Any others?
Those were the two that I had mentioned, or had noted specifically that were code requirements, but other items such as any required landscaping, parking islands, things of that nature, those are all code requirements that are standard as part of the plan and would be conditioned as part of the plan approval.
Okay, I think that's it for me right now.
Okay, very good. Mr. Frank, can I ask you a question? I know we've heard a lot about, some of the neighbors here have said they're not against development, but the height is a concern in regards to backing up to this neighborhood, which majority of the homes there on Hawthorne are single-story homes. What is the size of this, of the townhouses? What's the size of them? What's the square footage? I'm sorry.
I need to turn around and ask.
Ask.
Bear with me.
Ms. Petria. $2,460.
I'm going to repeat that into the microphone just for the record. The homes range between 1,700 square feet and 2,460 square feet.
And I heard you earlier, you indicated that if you went with a two-story as opposed to three-story, which is, I believe, what the agreement is, it takes out more trees.
Sure, bigger footprints, more landscaping that absorb, that's right.
That's the only difference between, if you could do it, you would just take down more trees.
Well, yes, sir, but I mean, that also results in a less attractive ultimate solution. I mean, when you talk about taking down trees, remember this is a site that's got some very significant tall trees on it. And so we're not talking about a 6-foot sapling, but really some meaningful landscaping. Also, the height of the townhomes as it's proposed is very consistent with the height of an R15 two-story colonial house with a sloped roof, when you measure it to the peak. And so the variation there, again, I would advocate that what we need to compare to is not the home next door that's 1 or 2 stories tall, but what home can be built next door or what home can be built on this property if the land is not rezoned.
So what you're saying is that currently, under the current zoning, the height would match this height?
Yes, sir. Can you help me get to my height comparison? There were 3 buildings.
Just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Bear with me just a second, Mr. Mayor.
I just want to pull that up, please.
I think that image is the best I can do to answer your question.
All right, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, there we go. So again, the image on the right is a typical 2-story colonial with a sloped roof that would represent the maximum height of a home that could be built in the R15 zoning. The building in the middle is the proposed elevation for the townhomes here. And as you can see, the peak of those structures is at a very similar height.
40 feet.
It's also worth noting that if you increase the footprint of the townhome to lower the height of the townhome, some of the existing mature landscaping that gets lost in the shuffle would be the existing trees between these townhomes and the existing homes on the west side of the alley.
Let's do it. Understood. Mr. Waddell?
Quick follow-up to the mayor's question. So the permitted by right R15 development height of roughly 40 feet. What's the permitted by right if somebody was to build an ADU on that property? Is it the same, or is there a lesser?
As I understand it, it's the same, although certainly
Staff
for staff to
confirm or-
confirm that if you like.
ADU height? It's the same. Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right, thank you.
Accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah. This question is for staff. In respect to the building that is adjacent to Oleander, I know that we have we have a commercial component in there. Being that you're across the street from Hanover Shopping Center, with all of those services that are literally walking distance to this property, which is what we're trying to achieve here, is because it was close to the amount of services. Why are we requiring any kind of commercial component in here?
For the O&I district, commercial district mixed use is how you can do multifamily. If the applicant wanted to go to a straight multifamily, they would need to look at another designation such as the MD17. So one of the reasons for the amount of commercial being 5% is because of that proximity of the grocery store that is located across the street at Hanover Center. Generally speaking, I think staff encouraged the applicant to do mixed use. That's something that on a major intersection, trying to put services with the housing to avoid having to walk across the street is something we would encourage, but obviously the option exists to do just multifamily, but it would require a different zoning district from what the applicant has proposed.
Because with the amount of services and commercial right across the street, it makes no sense on that side of the street, primarily that has been residential, and it backs up the residential that we shouldn't have. But I understand why you were talking about it. I know that we had a tremendous amount of discussion about this when the comprehensive plan was being developed in trying to bring the services closer to where people live, and I respect that position. But being that it is so close to all of these services across the street, I personally do not see a need for it personally, but I'll take anybody that defer on it. Mr. Waddell?
I happen to agree with the mayor. That's what stuck out to me almost immediately about this plan, the commercial, and we've seen this before in some O&I rezonings where there's a commercial component that just doesn't seem to fit and typically, or can sit empty for long periods of time. And specifically with the proximity to the commercial here, it just doesn't fit to me. So I guess to clarify, Ms. Painter, if we were to take this from O&I conditional zoning to MD17, it would remove the commercial from the plan. Would it substantively change? Would it save any other trees? Would it take some of the parking spaces away? And I guess lastly, could we do that from the dais here? That may be a question for Madam Attorney, but.
Staff has reviewed the proposal, and I believe it would be wholly compliant with the MD17 zoning district if the commercial component was removed. There would be the same open space requirements. Parking would largely be unchanged.
So none of the conditions would change, but all the conditions could still remain that are there, all the code items that we referenced before, finishing off the alleyway, all that would remain?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And I guess, Madam Attorney, if that was the will of the council, could we do that from here? Would it require going back through the process?
It would not require going back to Planning Commission. It would require for the applicant to agree to that change. But you can do down zoning, and if it's going from the O&I commercial component to MD-17, that would be considered down zoning. If you were up zoning to something more intense, then it would have to go back to Planning Commission.
Is your mic on, Meredith? Meredith, is your mic on?
Yes, I'm
So-
sorry.
Okay.
I think what you said, and you may ask you to say it again, was that if we were to do that and the applicant was to accept it, take it from O&I conditional to MD-17, because that would constitute down zoning, not up zoning, and because of that, it would not have to go back through the process. We'd do it right up here.
Correct, if the applicant is okay with.
If the applicants are
with that
amenable.
change.
Okay, thank you.
I got Ms. Andrews, and then Mr. Spears, and then Mr. Reinbark. Just queue up.
Could I get the diagram of the building heights? I think it was in the rebuttal portion.
There it is.
Yeah. So we're being told that if we do R15 single family, that it's going to go out instead of up, but it's going to give us the same height. But I don't think that the people who are concerned about 3- and 4-story buildings, I don't think they were concerned about the roof height. I think they were concerned about where the upstairs windows were. I think that was the major concern and not the roof height. And then the other thing is, I'm told that the applicant has a sincere and deep wish to preserve trees, but if he builds R15, he would cut down all the trees. I don't see how houses in that price range would sell with fewer trees.
Thank you, Councilwoman Andrews. And forgive me, I tried to explain the renderings that we were proposing in an appropriate way, and I'm going to say that again because I want to be really clear about this. We're not proposing that we would, if we divided those 7 lots, that we would build the houses in the fashion that we showed. We're demonstrating to you that your code doesn't require any tree preservation at all in that example. So the practical reality is if the land were divided into 7 lots and sold, the lots would be sold to builders, and those builders and their homeowner buyers would decide how many of the trees to keep and how many of the trees to get rid of. But I want to be really clear about the images that I put on the screen earlier were not an alternative proposed plan, but our best effort to demonstrate what your code allows as it sits today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Spears?
I tried to be quiet. I really did. But as long as this has gone on, I just couldn't do it. Here's my problem. I need us to show this same compassion when it comes to other communities and other projects by Mr. Spetrino. We have mulled over this for how long? 2 hours? 2 hours. And Mr. Spetrino and I know the relationship that we have when he brings a project forward. I've never seen this much opposition. I've never seen this Wilmington City Council fine-tooth a project as much as they fine-tooth this one. And I'm sorry, but it's only because of the neighborhood, this neighborhood. It never happens for any other Dave Spetrino project in any other part of Wilmington, North Carolina. I've never seen any of us older council members do this. And I'll be honest, I was having a optimistic thought as it relates to the new council members, and I'm still optimistic as to what you'll do as it relates to this. But consistency. I've heard a lot of things. I've heard consistency of the neighborhood, existence of the neighborhood. Someone's 1930s, I wrote that down. Protect the residents. Protect these residents. What about other residents who are impacted by a Days Petrino project? Do they not matter? Does the existence of their communities not matter? Because our constituents are asking us to do a job. You're asking us to consistently do a job. But I have a text message from someone who I won't name, who texts me at 6 a.m. in the morning. And he said this, and hold on, let me find it, because it was profound. Hold on. Oh, here it is. I think there is a balance to be maintained and wanted to discuss this with you. In my mind, this goes further than my neighborhood, but it took hitting my backyard to wake me up. I need this type of passion when other neighborhoods and communities are on the cusp of being changed, where the new development doesn't match that neighborhood. I'm not sure, I'm not certain about that. I'm not certain you'll show up. So I mean, I'm certain you may not like that. Like I said, I tried to be quiet. I've been getting a lot of flack for talking a lot lately, but I just had to say that. And so that's my piece.
Thank you. Mr. Rottenberg.
I think what happened is this project was probably more apt to be MD-17, and in order to either satisfy staff or to get something from staff, I think maybe it was kind of aimed in this direction. But if we could accomplish what Councilmember Waddell and the mayor, and I think Reverend Barnett, if we could do that here tonight, and that, I didn't ask for your comment, okay? I'm talking here.
I appreciate it. Excuse me, everybody. Come on. Please. Go ahead, Mr. Rottenberg.
I think what we're trying to do, Mr. Betts mentioned about the zoning. Until the 50s, we didn't have zoning. And everything along Oleander Drive, everywhere that was in the city was zoned R15, R20. And over the years, things change, culture changes, zonings change. 50%, 60% of what we do down here is land use. Conditional use permits, rezonings, and this is no different. And he also mentioned that the McRae's had it in their mind to leave that as a buffer. Show me where it says that. It doesn't say that. You just got used to it. And now something has come along, and it's in your backyard, and you don't want it. Ms. Hughes gave a very eloquent talk about it, and what it boils down to, everybody, half the people that came and said, we like it, but not there. So I think that the project can come along and be good. I think the applicant would be willing to shift it or change it or do something that would make it more pleasing. But I think our staff did a yeoman's job trying to put something good together that's going to help. And if you don't like that, I'm sorry. But we have to rely heavily on our staff, because if every time we do something, you come down here with a lot of people and change it, there's no sense in even having a planning staff or a planning commission or us.
Yeah. Mr. Joyner. Mr. Joyner.
Thank you. I have a question for staff, and you're going to have to cue something up to read this to me. So I have the existing and proposed zoning district purpose statements for R15 and O&I, and I'm going to ask you to read the MD17 one because I don't have that in front of me. So the O&I, which is what well, let me start with what it is now, R15. The R15 district is intended to accommodate existing single dwelling neighborhoods on moderate-sized lots yielding a gross density of less than 3 units per acre. Use of the R15 district should be limited to infill sites in already developed locations. And then the proposed change is to O&I, office and institutional. This district is intended to accommodate professional and medical offices, institutions of various sizes, places of assembly, and complementary uses without the added traffic and development intensity associated with broad commercial and retail activities. The O&I district is well suited to supporting higher education and healthcare centers and office uses, along with complementary uses such as small-scale retail services and restaurants. When appropriate conditions are met, residential uses in combination with compatible office and institutional uses are appropriate within this district to support a desirable live and work environment. And can you read for me the proposed statement or purpose statement for MD17?
The MD17 district is intended to be applied within the urban core of the city and other areas with a full range of amenities and commercial services. MD17 zoning is intended to provide a mix of densities and housing forms in a compact urban environment through redevelopment, infill on relatively small sites, and within mixed-use areas. Higher development intensity at appropriate locations is encouraged to support transit use, minimize traffic congestion, and provide a range of housing types.
All right, thank you.
So the question was asked, is the applicant willing to take the suggestion that was placed? Yeah, the MD17. Is that, what are your thoughts?
That would certainly change the proposal in that it would remove the 2,200 feet of commercial space. I've discussed that with the applicant, and if it is the will and the wish of council to approve the zoning as MD17 instead of as O&I, the applicant's willing to compromise and agree to that. I note, just looking at the zoning plan on the screen, that while O&I is directly across the street, the MFH that's right behind it is the old version of MD17. And the MD17 that's right next to it's there too. And of course, RB across Independence is all as consistent with MD17 as it is with O&I. If you go that route, there's a couple things that I think we need to address. First, you would have to include some sort of statement that the references to commercial use in the site plan and proposed conditions would have to be disregarded. And second, I would want to make sure that the same 45-foot height restriction applies. I think the MD17 height restriction is 96 feet, and so in full transparency, I want to make sure that if you make that change that we don't inadvertently have a height restriction that's greater than what we've come to the door willing to agree to. Does that answer your question, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Mr. Frank, just a question. I know that Mayor Pro Tem had asked about the buffering, and I understand with the driveway that comes off of the back of those units, is there any way, I don't know if you can pull up a picture there, where you have one access, where you have several accesses to those townhouses there?
Yes, sir.
And I don't know if y'all thought about this, and I'm sure it'd be a change if you move the townhouses forward, coming in off of the alley with one access, and then having another driveway that goes through the back of those units to put the buffering there. I mean, it's kind of crazy to say you're going to put buffering on an alleyway, but could that be done? I'm just...
There's a very good design reason for the entry from the alleyway. that I'm not well qualified to answer, so I'm going to ask our civil engineer, if it's all right with you,
Please.
to answer your question.
It's one of the
This is
questions
Mr.
that
Mark
we
Strickland.
talked about.
Hi, I'm Mark Strickland with the civil engineer for this project, and can you just restate that question again, clarify
I'm
that?
just wondering if you could move the townhouses a little bit closer to Independence, thereby creating an internal alleyway to the back of those units. I don't know what the turn radius, if we could even accommodate that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of flexibility there, but the main reason for the location is to provide that fire marshal access to basically pull in straight along the widened drive aisle off of Independence, and to be able to access the mixed-use building and then back out and then exit the site through Independence. So
I got that. I'm talking about on the backside where you have the driveways that are accessing the alleyway. Still have the rear parking, but being able to bring an internal alleyway down, thereby giving the buffering, added buffering or fencing of
So
some sort.
shifting the building slightly towards Independence?
Yes.
Yeah, so the reason for that is it can shift a couple feet, but it can't move too significantly without shifting that drive aisle that is on the east side of those buildings. That's what becomes the restricting factor at that point, because that drive aisle has to be fairly straight to allow that emergency access through there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, sure. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Strickland, sorry. If, again, we haven't asked well, I guess we have asked the applicant if he'd be amenable to removing the commercial area. If we were to switch to MD17 and the commercial area was to be removed from the plan, would the multifamily building be able to be shifted closer to Independence?
So the reason for the current location of that building is there's a significant stand of trees on that corner of the intersection, and the building is pulled up closer to the alley in order to preserve the trees on the independent side of the building. That would be the biggest restricting factor from shifting that building down. We could always look at that, but that's going to come at the cost of trees. And the reason for citing that building is to save those trees, because they're particularly large trees to provide the screening that we're looking to offer on that corner.
So we have some specimen trees right there that we're trying
The
to be.
specimen trees are, there's about 4 of them along the oleander side, but there's also large trees that wrap around that corner. And yeah, any closer to oleander will definitely impact specimens. Any closer to Independence is going to impact some larger trees.
Okay.
But not specimens.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask you another question, Mr. Strickland?
Yep.
According to this, the commercial area is already there. If you remove that, could you not slide the rest of the building up to where that commercial area space is now? That wouldn't impact the trees. It's already there.
Yeah, that's only the first floor of the building, though.
That's right.
Yeah, so it could be a tricky architectural situation. Could be possible, but I think it's still going to impact the trees.
We're trying to do the impossible here tonight,
Yeah.
okay? So let's
Yeah,
think about that.
It would be tricky.
May I respond briefly? So if you were to go that route and propose zoning approval, conditional zoning approval for MD17 rather than O&I, that would free up some things. Less parking would be required. There would be a little bit more space in the building footprint to work with. And that may allow us to propose a smaller parking area. It may allow us to propose, ultimately, for technical approval, a smaller building footprint for the what's now a mixed-use building, but would then just be multifamily. It's not reasonable or realistic to make any sort of changes along those lines today. And so if we're going that route, I would request that the site plan remain as it is, and we accept that material compliance with the site plan is something that we'll have to honor when we reach our conversation with staff about the technical approval of the thing. But for all concerned, taking the commercial use out, while it certainly removes one source of revenue for the development, it also removes some burdens from the site, and I have to, in candor, acknowledge that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Madam Clerk, have you had any additional comments that you want to share with us?
Yes, sir. I had one additional comment that did come from Mr. Jeff Walton, who resides downtown on Market Street. He submitted a form to say he was in favor of the requests. There is always going to be public opposition to rezonings or those that are against them. Growth should be accommodated in the city through mixed-use neighborhoods with a variety of housing types and price points. This is Planning 101. A perfect example of that appropriate transition is New Hanover Shopping Center transitioning to the parcel, transitioning to single-dwelling residential. I urge you to vote for approval of this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any additional comments? Questions?
Just a question for clarity for me. All right, if we move the commercial component, okay, then we're still getting the same number of houses.
Yes, sir. The cap on the number of residences doesn't change.
Okay.
It's still capped at 24 multifamily condominium units and 16 townhomes.
Okay. What about the part where we talked about, and staff was good at thinking about getting where people can go back and forth to stores and, you know, walkability and all that. We're saying that they'll be able to go across Oleander.
Yes, sir. The pedestrian access to commercial facilities, if we're talking about pedestrian access, requires crossing Independence or Oleander, or using the adjacent multi-use path, the cross-city trail. Bicycle or vehicular access is also a viable possibility, but the concept, I believe, that staff was explaining and that Councilman Waddell was referencing is we know we want mixed use. Mm-hmm. We know it's good to have homes that are located close to offices and stores and services. And the code highly encourages incorporation of mixed use on an individual site. But you don't necessarily have to have both kinds of uses on one site to achieve the mixed use goal. And here, you've got such significant commercial activity located nearby that I think that the point is, if you incorporate solely residential on this site without a commercial component, you're still achieving a mixed-use goal because you're delivering a variety of housing types close to existing commercial services.
Okay. And when we remove the commercial services, the person that really loses is the applicant.
Yes, sir. That wasn't an easy decision to make quickly, but again, we are willing to make that compromise.
Okay. And I do appreciate the work of the staff as well as the work of the applicants that you guys have said. You know, you've been working at this for almost a year, and you're absolutely right. This is one of the projects that I've seen that had a lot of blue. You know, most of the projects come through have, you know, a little bit of red, but it had a lot of blue to it. So I just appreciate the work of the staff and you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I guess if we're asking to switch this, it seems only right. If Mr. Richardson, do you have any commentary on that change?
Thank you, Mr. Waddell, for the opportunity. So everyone that's opposed to this tonight came in with the applicant's application for O&I. And now to adjust on the fly to the new zoning district without us having the ability to review the plan with respect to that down zoning and what it means with respect to the alleyway and what it means with respect to density, I think is unfair to my clients to not be able to present and be prepared to deal with that, quite frankly. They should be, if the applicant, well, first of all, the whole downzoning concept forgets the fact that every one of my clients purchased with that area being zoned R15 and has been zoned R15 forever, okay? It's just ignoring that aspect and saying, well, we're going to downzone. Well, why shouldn't my folks have the ability to have me prepare and them to prepare for arguments against this downzoning to, what is it, MB17, whatever it is? I haven't even had a chance to look at that. Fundamental fairness would say that we should get the opportunity to review that and come back at the next council meeting. If they want to do that on the fly, then we should have the opportunity to prepare as to whether or not, and maybe at least some communications with Mr. Frank. Mr. Frank and I have a good relationship, and we can talk. But I mean, my folks right now haven't had the chance to digest that, and I think they should have that opportunity if they're going to go forward with this. Or you reject the current application, and then they can come back in and refile for a new zoning application under this downzoning district that they're talking about now. It's just fundamentally fair. That's all I'm talking about is fairness, okay? And so from that standpoint, we would be opposed to the adjustment on the fly tonight to a new zoning district. Has different requirements. I mean, Mr. Joyner had read into the record about the purpose statement of each of these zoning districts, and they do differ significantly. And so happy to answer any questions while I'm up here, if council has any. Thank you for the opportunity to get up here. Thanks.
All right. Any additional comments, questions? Okay. Yes, Mr. Frank.
I'm not sure if you want me to respond to that or not. I'm glad to if you do. The suggestion has been that you do something different than what was proposed previously, which is to not vote on this tonight or send it back or reject this in the name of a varied application. The only thing that changes if you go from O&I to MD17 and remove the commercial is you remove the commercial. The site plan is exactly the same. The number of units is exactly the same. The uses are exactly the same, minus the commercial. That said, our willingness and interest in cooperating with council on that this evening is based on the premise that you would have an opportunity to vote on it this evening. As Councilman Spears described, we've talked about this at some meaningful length. There's been some significant community input on it. And so, therefore, I just want to clarify that we remain willing and comfortable to agree to such a motion and proposal tonight. But if the choice is between rejecting this zoning in the name of a new application and moving forward with the O&I as it's originally proposed, of course, we would ask that you do the latter. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? It's 9:30. There's no additional comments. I am going to close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council in respect to this public hearing item.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor. If I was to move to approve with the MD17 conditional district, I want to be quite certain that the height limit does not increase from what we have now.
The MD17 does allow for 96 feet in building height. However, the applicant would be conditioned to the elevations and site plan provided. So you would be conditioning them to the 45-foot building that is shown on the plans.
So should I just put another condition in that caps the building height? Not necessary?
You wouldn't have to, because it's already tied to the site plan, and the elevations are in the site plan, and so you wouldn't have to add that additional condition.
So they cannot go above, what is it shown, what is shown here tonight?
45 feet is the maximum.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Andrews?
I just,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
I guess my question is, if we rezone this to MD 17 or whatever, conditioned on this site plan, and then the applicant sells it, it's already rezoned, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, it's already rezoned, but the same conditions, the person who buys it is still going to be held to those same conditions.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Waddell, are you making a motion?
I move to approve the proposed amendment to rezone property located at 1320 Independence Boulevard from R15 Moderate Density Single Dwelling District to MD17 High Density Multiple Residential District Conditional District Development, and find it to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan based on the application materials and the information provided at the public hearing and in the staff report, and to find approval of the rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The proposed rezoning would provide additional housing along two major thoroughfares near commercial services and along a transit line, and serves as a transition between higher intensity uses in the adjacent residential neighborhood.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve by Councilmember Waddell, second by Councilmember Reinbark. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That
No.
item passes 5-2. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Waddell, second by Councilmember Rivenbark. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item PH2, is ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 10.7 acres. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to take a 5-minute. Yeah. You ready? Okay, we're back in session. Item PH2 is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 10.27 acres of land located at 120 Switchyard Road from MHLCD multifamily residential district, medium high density legacy conditional district to MD10 CD medium density multi-dwelling residential district, conditional district for a 60-unit residential development. This time I'd like to recognize our Deputy City Manager, Mr. Chad McEwen. Mr. McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Planning Manager, Mr. Patrick O'Mahony is going to overview this item.
Good evening again, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. As mentioned, the site's located on the west side of Switchyard Road, south of Market Street. It's approximately 10.27 acres and is currently vacant. Here's a map showing the general vicinity surrounding the request, as well as photos of the existing conditions and photos of adjacent land uses. As mentioned, the site is located in an area currently zoned MF-MHL-CD, which is multifamily residential district, medium high density legacy conditional district. Commercial zoning is located to the north along Market Street and to the east along Cinema Drive. There's also multi-dwelling zoning located to the southwest of the site. The applicant's proposing to rezone the site from the existing zoning to an MD10 CD, which is a medium density multi-dwelling residential district. This is for a 60-unit residential development. As you may recall, this site was previously rezoned from CS Commercial Services to the MF-MHCD district. This was to allow for a 192-unit residential development. This was approved by City Council on September 8th of 2020. This project, as shown on your screen, was 492 units, 10% of which were going to be dedicated for workforce housing. This project was released for construction February 2nd, 2022, but has not been constructed. The road improvements have been constructed to Switchyard Road, though. Here is the current proposed site plan. Again, the major changes are the reduction in units from 192 to 60, the reduction in workforce housing units, and the new zoning district, which is proposed. The applicant's proposing a townhome product shown here with the same entrance points as the previous project. These are proposed elevations submitted by the applicant. The comprehensive plan identifies this site as within a high-density transition area of opportunity and a urban mixed-use center on the growth strategies map. Areas well suited for infill development should be redeveloped in a way that maintains or enhances the desired character, increases housing options, and improves the overall quality of life in the vicinity. New development and density increases are encouraged for sites within close proximity to commercial services, employment centers, and transit routes. Staff notes that the proposed rezoning does reduce the number of dwelling units and the number of affordable or workforce housing component, though the proposed zoning would still allow for compatible development and additional residential units near commercial services and transit stops. Therefore, staff believes the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and that it's reasonable in public interest. Staff recommends conditional approval. The Planning Commission also recommended approval at their July meeting. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. The applicant's here as well.
Any questions of staff? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Still like to recognize the applicant.
Thank you very much. My name's Cindy Wolf, and I'm here on behalf of the owner and the applicant. The original high-density project for this tract, which he, as he pointed out, proposed 192 rental units, has not come to fruition. Page 2. Great. Thank you, sorry. But as he did point out, the improvements to Switchyard, which included utilities, paving, sidewalk, has all been done, and the connection of Dalmatian from Switchyard over to Cinema has been completed. Development for rental housing is still certainly a major focus, and the proposal for this is more of a modification than anything else. Thankfully, there is not opposition to housing in this location, but it's simply a different housing product. The current zoning, as he pointed out, is a legacy district of the multifamily medium-high density, which allowed over 17 units an acre. The change in the project scope would translate into the MD10, so we saw no reason to keep that higher density. The MD10 satisfies the criteria. This exhibit shows both the previous site plan with the larger building footprints. The proposed modification compares with no more than, or actually less than, the surface coverage. So it's really switching housing product. The plan is straightforward with 2 sections of attached townhomes. The majority of the low-lying vegetative area is still being preserved as permanent open space. We still have the connecting pathway for the enjoyment of that open space and certainly to link the community as a whole. The plan has had the preliminary technical review for code compliance. The townhomes at 2 and 3 story, we're showing all the 3, will limit the footprint and building coverage but still be able to provide garages while maximizing the possible floor area. The homes can be 2 or 3 bedroom. The developer hasn't landed on a specific style, so we've provided both of these examples. Since the townhomes around the site have varying aspects to the streets and the common areas, we've made sure that both the front and rear facades have that attractive look, whether it be traditional or contemporary. The Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan identifies this tract as being in an area of opportunity for high-density transition. It's not as high as the 192 rentals, but this will provide townhomes at 60 for individual ownership. Development of the property will still be consistent with the concept of infilling underutilized land where urban services are already located. It's certainly walkable to a wealth of shops, eateries, and other activities. Economic growth should be accommodated with a variety of housing types. This project will serve to upgrade the land, benefit the tax base, and provide new homes without adverse effect to any community. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Yes, we have a question here, Mrs. Spears.
So, Ms. Wolf, you said that the previous project did not come to fruition. Why?
That's hard to say. Whether it be economy or the type of housing product, the location, I wouldn't venture.
So, but in that initial project, there was a workforce housing element, right?
There was.
And so you've gone away from rentals to for sale.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Joyner?
Do we know what role rail realignment, if any, what role, if any, rail realignment plays with this strip here that we're looking at?
I'd need to defer to the staff on that. I haven't heard word of anything. It has not come up in any of the reviews.
Sorry, I'm not aware of any changes that are proposed to the rail line in that area.
And then, I guess, Switchyard Road is where the nearest rail intersection is going to be, just out of frame of this photograph?
That's correct. In the lower right-hand section is the crossing that goes over to the wet sig. I think there was a marble company, there's an architecture firm and an office building.
Is that crossing, and I actually don't know if there are any crossings within the city that don't have alerts, like where the train would be required to?
I don't have it any further. It does not have an alert. But all that is across it, as I said, are two businesses in that building.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
Good question. Nice project. Was any consideration given to trying to put some affordable housing in there?
We know that the visions and goals for growth and economic development, encourage safe and affordable housing for everybody. The difference is that it's difficult to coordinate that code's criteria for dedication of workforce housing in a for-ownership scenario, because what happens is restrictive covenants that say you have to own this house for 15 years just aren't justifiable. It's not in the code based upon that. Now, that being said, this location, the type of houses in a for-ownership scenario, what ends up happening is if you're going to sell these houses for less than all the others, then the others will be more. It's just not feasible to adapt that criteria of the workforce. That being said, I feel like in this location, in the inner city, it's next to the railroad, I think the affordability will be driven by the market, and other communities in this area have what leans towards the same workforce values.
Okay.
I'm not sure I answered your question exactly, but the criteria that is set up in the code for the affordability factor, it's easy to apply to rentals. It would not be very easy to apply to ownership.
The math doesn't work. Okay.
Mr. Spears?
Yeah, Ms. Wolf, I can't agree with that. Determine that it'll be around about the same affordable.
I'm not saying the same, but
Well,
certainly,
But what was the term you used?
well, location
No, not
has to do
location,
with
but I
real
mean, as
estate.
far as affordability, the market will determine what? What was the word that you used?
The value of buying a home in this location, the type of home that's built,
Right, but you said it was inner city and it should be
and urban, it's more urban.
proximity to workforce, right? Is that not what you said?
No, I just said that the value of construction, the value of homes, the market is dictated a lot by location, certainly by the construction itself.
Right.
But
The previous project we had, there was no issue with the price point. There was only an issue with it being there. So, and the range there were from
much higher.
3s to 6s, right? So affordability, the market won't determine what's going to happen here at Switchyard, because if there's a nice development there and based on what's close or what may come, the market will determine it to be higher than being more affordable.
But these aren't 1,700 to 2,400 square feet. These are more like 1,200 to 1,600 square feet. There's so many factors in play over the value and the marketability of
Right,
them.
but you do know people are living in tiny homes, right?
Oh, I do. I
Right.
mean, I'm
So,
in 900 square feet.
They're not paying, they're not super cheap or super affordable either. Right or
I'm
wrong?
sure that depends on location also.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Waddell?
I'm sure the developer has done some pro formaing on the anticipated market value of the finished product.
You just can't these days with construction costs, with the time that it takes to get things re-permitted. I don't know that he would want to try to opine on values. Okay, please.
My name is Joe Sabina. I'm the developer. Thank you for having me today.
You picked a great day.
There isn't a jurisdiction that I work in where affordable housing isn't an issue. Wilmington is no different, and I've worked in dozens. Everybody wants affordable housing. It comes down to who's going to pay for it. You have a site here that's going to be fee simple, so the rules are difficult to not only enforce but define what affordable is in this case. You can look at it. There's a railroad track right next to it. It's surrounded by industrial. The reason why I'm going to dance and avoid giving you a price on these is because 3 years ago, costs across the board went up 40%. And guys like me, almost went out of business because of that. So I have to be very sensitive to commit on a public record what these are going to cost, or ultimately buy for. I will tell you that the builder that's going to be building these is contemplating a 2-story product as well as a 3-story product, or both, with the intent of providing a product at a good, fair price and value that will, let's put it this way, will probably be more affordable than most of the stuff you're approving right now.
Yeah, Mr. Sabina,
Okay.
if I may.
Yeah.
I'm supportive of this. I happen to believe that offering more for sale products like we saw earlier, like we're going to see here, creates naturally occurring affordability because it opens up a lot of avenues where people may be renting an apartment, they have an ability to buy, create some equity, and that opens up some.
Yeah.
So basically, I was looking for an idea, and you say it's going to be probably a bit less than what we're approving.
So yeah, and I'm trying to be. I want to be respectful, and that's why I don't want to act. I don't want to come across. I'm avoiding the direct question, but you can see there are apartments across the railroads. Usually, guys like me love to put apartments or townhomes next to apartments where there's high-density apartments, because those folks in the apartments, as they improve in life and get their head above water, can move into something in the same neighborhood and actually achieve home ownership. That's what I'm in the business of doing. I'm not in the business of providing rentals for people. We're in the business of enabling the people to buy a home and build equity. And, I still believe that home ownership is the best way to improve your situation in this country. So that's what we do. We've looked at a lot of deals. We looked at a lot of properties in Wilmington, some specifically along different corridors that you've talked about tonight, actually. Those were going to be a lot more expensive than what these are likely going to be. That's what I can basically tell you. And I can also tell you that if you look at the bandwidth of incomes and home purchasing power, these will embrace a wider portion of that bell curve than what you've been talking about earlier today. So I hope that answers your question in a honest but careful way, so that I don't say something on the public record that I can't deliver a year from now when these houses are going to start being built.
Ms. Rumberg?
We understand quoting numbers because everything we do, it ends up costing 30, 40% more when we do it.
Yeah,
It's just the nature of the economy we're in.
Yeah, I've chosen an interesting vocation because no matter what I do, I think I've figured it all out, but there's always something that catches you with your
Let me
pants
know when you
down.
figure it out. I think what Kevin and we all would like to see is we have an ordinance with our rentals that you can reward the developer with more density, and we don't have that when it comes to for sale, and we need that. We need an ordinance where we can give you something in return for that.
Yeah, and you know what? I've worked with a lot of municipalities, and there's a lot of creative things out there. The best, I mean, we're going to get off topic, but the best approach that I've seen that a municipality take about affordable housing is the portfolio approach, where they give incentives to guys like me, but they also have public funds that they're doing things on the city's own, and then they also have a variety of public and private initiatives that enable affordable housing, and then a lot of in between. What I mean by that is the municipalities that I think are achieving the greatest traction are the ones that have a portfolio of options and are willing to always be creative. And I will assure you that guys like me and builders that I work with, if we could figure out a way to get true affordable housing delivered, there isn't a builder or developer out there that would not do it. Because it's a very important issue and it comes up in every meeting in every jurisdiction that I'm involved with. It's really complicated and everybody wants to solve it, but it's complicated, tough. But the desire is there, and there are solutions. So
Thank you.
I can meet with you later, and we could have coffee. and I can share.
Wait a minute. Could you come back for a second?
Yes, sir.
Because you just alluded to something that, so you build all over the country, or you've been to a
I
lot of
have.
different-
Yeah,
okay.
I don't anymore, but I used to, yes.
Okay, I understand. You mentioned that there's some municipalities or places where you have built that they've got it together in regards to how they're putting all of this funding, private, public, together with some sort of a goal and objective.
Yes.
Could you tell me what city
So
that you think
I'm-
has got it going on, that you think is getting it?
So to give you an example, one city that, I live in the Triangle. I live in Raleigh. But I'm here all the time. I only do my
Sure, okay.
business here and in the Triangle. One municipality that really misses the mark is Chapel Hill. They require guys like me to put a affordable housing component in everything. And what they've essentially done is they shut down development because you can't, they forced a square peg in a round hole. And kind of like the discussion earlier, Chapel Hill's a very high rent town.
Sure.
And if you can imagine land values there, extraordinarily high. But they have a requirement of affordable housing, affordable fee simple ownership requirement.
Stick
Sorry,
to the
man.
microphone, yeah.
And what they end up having, they create this catch-22 where it's great from a public press. It works. It's great. It gets great fodder, but it can't be applied practically in reality, because when you get to fee simple single-family detached ownership, you end up having $2 million houses, and then the only way you can make a house affordable in that subdivision is to put a very, very small house on the same size lot that is required by zoning. So it's lopsided.
Sure.
So from a public standpoint, they beat their chest and say, we're pro, doesn't work. City of Raleigh, surprisingly, and I live there and I work there, and it can be a challenging municipality to work in as a capital city. They have embraced the portfolio approach that I kind of mentioned. And so they have incentives. So they work and they provide density incentives to kind of get smaller units, higher density credits to incentivize and frankly, horse trade in terms of conditional uses and permitting to make it work. The city also uses public funds to go out and buy properties, and they don't buy them in just one location. They make sure that they buy vacant properties, or even like properties that really need to be redeveloped. They're kind of, dilapidated stuff that's just over, it's tired. Yeah. And they buy them in all the neighborhoods, not just one area of the city, all the neighborhoods. And then what they do is they'll put out, the guys like me, they'll put out a public a request for offers and say, look, we're willing to throw in the land. You presented the best solution to provide what we want here, which is some affordable housing. And the way they do it is, if for fee ownership, they'll have a deed restriction put on it. So that if someone buys that house, they can't go out and sell it 2 years later and double their money. But what it enables them to do is they have to stay in the house for a certain period of time. If they sell it, the value is fixed, so it stays affordable, but they're allowed to take the equity with them, which is the primary benefit of home ownership. And then the city really encourages, I've been involved with a couple projects in Raleigh where we've done affordable housing just because the folks I work with are interested in that. And the portfolio approach, I think, is the smartest, because there is no one silver bullet in it. And then there's also the question of how you spread it out. Is it the responsibility of just a few individuals to provide affordable housing, or is it the responsibility of the entire community to chip in for affordable housing? And that gets to be a little bit more political, which you guys are better at than I am. But there's two sides of the coin where, Raleigh continues to get criticized because there's never enough.
Sure.
But if you look at their statistics, each year they track and they post a scorecard of how many affordable units they're delivering. It doesn't get solved overnight, but each year they get a little bit more and a few more, and it gets better and better. And no municipality is perfect, but that's what I've seen works, that I think is the most sincere and practical in terms of really tackling a very tough problem.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the honesty. I appreciate the honesty, because that's a strategy that I would like to take a look at, because I do believe that you have to have a multiple ways to attack this issue.
And I'm sure that you do a lot of cross-pollinating amongst elected officials. I would encourage you to reach out to Raleigh. Absolutely, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Probably one of the best commentaries I've heard in a long time. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to open up the public hearing and ask if anyone in the public wishes to speak in favor or in opposition to item PH2. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, have you received any additional commentary?
No, sir, I
Opinions?
did not.
Okay, thank you. I will now close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council. We have a motion approved by Mayor Pro Tem Barnett, second by Councilmember Joyner. Mr. Barnett, I believe you have to read a consistency statement for the record, sir.
I move to approve the proposed amendment to rezone property located at 120 Switch Yard Road from MF, MHCD multi-family, medium high density conditional district to MD10 CD medium density multiple dwelling conditional district for a 60-unit residential development, and finding to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan. Based on the application materials and the information provided at the public hearing and in the staff report, and the final approval of the rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The proposed rezoning would allow for comparable infill development and provide additional housing near commercial services.
All ready to vote? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, there we go.
Do it again.
I'm going to take a voice for it because this thing is slow tonight, so I'm going to say again, all in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye, raising your hand.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 1 opposed, okay? Do we have a motion to waive second reading? We have a motion by Councilmember Waddell, second by Councilmember Joyner. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed? The item passes unanimously on second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item 01, which is an ordinance making supplemental appropriation to the Public Improvement/Equipment Fund for a New Hanover County ABC Board grant in the amount of $50,000 for the purchase of 3 e-bikes, 1 Burla IVE toolkit, and 3 decibel meters. At this time, I recognize our Deputy City Manager, Mr. Chad McEwen. Chad?
Thank you, sir. Police Chief Donnie Williams will present this item.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I would like to start off by recognizing the New Hanover County ABC Board and the partnership that we have in place with them. Since 2022, they have provided us with $140,000 in law enforcement funding to help us supplement our budget. And that has been tremendous for the department. We've been able to purchase 10 e-bikes, 3 interactive kiosks. We built a state-of-the-art bicycle repair shop. We've upfitted our video production studio. And tonight we will be asking for 3 additional items. The Burla system is a vehicle download system, and it will be utilized to help us with crash reconstruction and other criminal investigations. The 3 additional e-bikes will allow us to outfit the entire downtown unit, assigning each officer or supervisor assigned to the unit an individual bicycle. And finally, the decibel meters, that was something that we had requested in our budget, and it didn't make it through the budget process, so we had to get creative and find another way to acquire that equipment, and they will be utilized for enforcing noise ordinance citywide, and they will be assigned to our patrol division. At this time, any questions?
Any questions for the chief? Okay. What are the wishes of council in respect to the ordinance? We have a motion approved by Councilmember Waddell, second by Councilmember Spears. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passed unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made. Motion made by Councilman Rivenbark, second by Mayor Pro Tem Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passed unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is our resolutions. R1 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to apply for a New Hanover Community Endowment Grant in the amount of $2,758,200 for a 3-year workforce housing voucher program. This time I'd like to recognize our Deputy City Manager, Mr. McEwen. Mr. McEwen.
Thank you, sir. Police Chief Donnie Williams will also present this item.
Okay.
In the 1990s, the WPD had an officer in residency program. The program was designed to reduce crime by having additional police presence in their neighborhoods. The city paid the full rent to the landlord on behalf of the officer. Each officer was given a take-home car and provided with a burglar alarm system. That program ended around 2005 due to funding. Sergeant Will Richards is one of our employees that was part of that program back in 2005, and Will is actually here present with me. And if you want to hear from Will later on, he can tell you how this program impacted him and how he's now a homeowner in the city of Wilmington. Workforce housing in the city is a concern, and not just for the police profession. We want to reestablish this program with a program for WPD officers to reside in the city of Wilmington. We started working on this idea 18 months ago. This program idea was in the works well before the recent pay concern and is not a direct response to it. I actually met with the endowment back in May, and we had some discussions with some of the board members prior to May. Current salaries, benefits, and employee child care options do need to be addressed, but they need to be addressed separately from this program. This program is designed to have more police presence in the city limits like the last program did. The program is designed to help with crime reduction, retention, and recruiting, even though this program alone will not fix those issues. We need to look far beyond this program. The program would consist of the following. We would be requesting $2.7 million in grant funding from the community endowment to fund a 3-year project. Our proposal is for 2 cohorts of 50 officers to directly receive rental or mortgage assistance over an 18-month period. The total value for the first cohort of officers per officer over an 18-month period is approximately $22,000. The total value of the second cohort of officers over an 18-month period would be approximately $25,000 due to possible inflation. $375,000 is budgeted for program administration over the 3 years, and we've spoken with our Housing and Neighborhood Services Department internally as a potential partner to manage it, and we've also spoken with the Wilmington Housing Authority. Officer slots would be distributed geographically throughout all 6 police districts and the downtown district based on the size of the district. The larger districts could have more slots versus the smaller ones. This is to avoid all officers living in one particular neighborhood or one side of the city. It would be up to each officer on where they would want to reside in each particular district, and they will not be expected to be on duty 24 hours, 7 days a week. Police officers need a break, so this is not to put them in a neighborhood to work. When they're off, they need to be off. They need to be able to mentally recharge. For a district, for the downtown district, due to its small size, if this is approved, we would look at two officers there. District 1, 4 officers. District 2, 8 officers. District 3, 4 officers. District 4, 8 officers. District 5, 12 officers. And District 6, 12 officers. And again, we're not asking them to live in a particular neighborhood. It would be up to them where they want to live at, as long as they're spread out throughout the city. The program eligibility would be for our lower ranks. So basically, our sergeants would be eligible for 15% of these vouchers. Corporals would be eligible for 25% of the vouchers, and officers would be eligible for 60% of the vouchers. There are a lot of questions, and someone's got to have oversight of this program, and I don't think it needs to be me. So we would ask you to appoint an independent board comprised of 7 members, 1 from each police district, and they could adjust the program, provide oversight, set the rules. If we have more than 50 officers that would be interested in this, let them pick the officers. I do not want to be part of that process. I would just want to be there with them as a technical advisor and to address questions about the scope of the grant. During this first cohort, we'd like to start the process of seeking state and federal dollars, because we want to be able to continue this program, and I don't think the endowment would be up to funding it long term. With the officer in residency program back in the 90s, we didn't measure crime metrics around where the officers were located. With technology, we would be able to do that now, try to measure if we are actually seeing a crime reduction with this program. At this time, are there any questions?
Chief, just on the 7-member board, are you asking the city council to appoint that board of 7 members?
Yes, sir.
Is there any specific, like an accountant, somebody that deals with mortgage lending, or does it matter? Is there preference?
I would say someone that definitely has a housing background, someone that has an accounting background. One of the things that we have found out, that if the city receives the grant and we give the funds to the employee, it will be considered a benefit, so it would be taxable. If we could partner with another organization and they applied for the grant and they gave it to the employee, it may not be taxable. But I think we would definitely want someone with a CPA background on the board. And the other thing is, I think it'll be a conflict of interest if we have a council member on it, if we have a current or former city employee on it also.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, and I guess there's 7 of us here, so each one of us can appoint 1 member to this body to convene.
Districts.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Does the endowment look favorable? I mean, you've talked with them. Are they saying, yeah, go for it, apply?
They didn't say yay or nay, but they didn't say no. So my thing is, what do we have to lose here? This is an opportunity to help our officers and help our community out.
Okay, then my last question is, do you know any officers in the country that are doing this?
There are other locations that are doing similar programs, and I can't recall off the top of my head where they're at or how they're funded.
Yeah. All right. I think we need to apply for as many grants as we can, especially through that endowment.
Yeah. Mr. Wandell?
What's the deadline to submit this application to the New Hanover County Endowment?
They didn't give me one.
Do we know what the grant application process is? Rachel, you probably do, right?
Chief
I saw your head nodding
No,
from
it's
back
okay.
there.
Chief Williams can probably speak to this, but it's a rolling application at this point. They're not doing the large cycles
Okay.
that they've done in the past, and so it's based on relationship building and having these conversations, so.
So it's open, as soon as we want to get something in, they'll take it, basically?
Yes, we had to sign up to get into the online portal, which we've done that. And there's a letter of intent, but they've already sent me some hard copies of some basic instructions.
Okay.
And we've been trying to build those relationships, like I said, for the past 18 months. This is not something that we just came up with over the last couple of weeks.
Chief Williams, I applaud you. I mean, to get $2.7 million from the endowment for the officers is great. And, you know, hopefully we can have a further conversation with the endowment about other civil servants, just not police, fire, teachers. There's a lot of people that are becoming priced out of this community because of the home price values. And I applaud you for taking the initiative to work with the endowment and to do this and to move forward with it. I think it's a good first start, and they've got money over there and they want to do it to help this community, and we need it. So I appreciate that. And affordable housing, as we've been hearing, it's probably is becoming a national issue all over the country. So thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other comments? Okay. We're ready to take a vote. We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Andrews, second by Councilmember Spears. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item, okay, there we go. That item passes unanimously. That brings us to our last order of business, which is our reports, is a report of Council's Evaluations Committee. And at this time, I'd like to recognize Councilmember Kevin Spears as the chairman of the Council's Evaluation Committee. Mr. Spears.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the chair of the Evaluations Committee, myself and my fellow council members have concluded our evaluation of the city attorney, the city clerk, and the city manager, and we are here to provide this information to the public. The city attorney, well, let me say this: the city attorney, the city clerk, and the city manager have all been found to meet expectations as laid out by themselves and by the city council. And so they all will be receiving raises. For the city attorney, her new salary will be $194,250.16. City clerk will be $108,500.34. City manager will be $257,985.26. These new salaries will go into effect with the first pay period in fiscal year 25. Make a motion for us to approve.
We have a motion by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Andrews. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. This concludes the regular agenda. Are there any items to be brought forward by our city attorney?
No, sir, I'd just like to say thank you. We appreciate your continued support.
Thank you for your hard work. Deputy City Manager?
Just reassure council that we are monitoring the storm. We've had several meetings today, internal, as well as meetings with New Hanover County Emergency Management in regards to storm preparation, monitoring the storm. At this time, we have no plans to close any city offices, but if anything changes in regard to the forecast or track of the storm, we'll certainly let you know if those plans regarding city offices change.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
No, sir. I just want to say I am grateful, thankful, and look forward to continue to work for you guys. Thank you.
Mr. Joyner?
Thank you very much. Just want to encourage everybody to stay safe during the upcoming weather event. And then I'm a big fan of podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. And one of the podcasts that I sometimes listen to is called the 538 Politics Podcast. And they are very focused on polling and data around political trends. And they recently did an episode on civic respect. and the way that people from different political parties perceive and exhibit respect towards, or fail to exhibit respect towards, people with different views. And I thought it was really interesting as far as the data, and I thought it was really interesting as something that I think we can all reflect on as we approach the upcoming election, which is going to be very charged and heated, I think. So would encourage you, if you have 30 minutes, you're out walking the dog or in the car driving, 538 Politics. It's a good episode.
Mr. Waddell, Mayor Pro Tem.
I just want to encourage people to make sure you registered to vote. As Councilman Joyner mentioned, it's important that everybody vote. I can't say that enough. And then the last thing I'll say is, as we preparing for the weather, at that time, most time people check in their neighbors, you know, and I think that's something we ought to do even in the sunshine, is make sure that we check on the people that are right around us. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Rivenbar?
Yes, I think I've mentioned this before, but I want to mention it again.
And if you press 1, there's special help for veterans. So if you know of anybody, especially a veteran who is down and might need some help, encourage them to take advantage of that 988 and press 1 for veterans help. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Spears?
Yes, sir. Reiteration of what my fellow council members said. Please be safe as it relates to the storm. Also, COVID numbers are climbing back up. COVID is coming back around, so be safe, protect your neighbors, protect your family. Wanna do something, Chief. I don't know if you want to walk up or what. You can stay back there, but come forward. I don't think he knows that I know this, but there was a murder that took place in the city last week, and as if I don't know how many of you know this, but I know this because the chief is a friend of mine. But the chief comes out to the scene almost every single time. But the chief, when he left the scene, he said that he was going to find the suspect's vehicle. And the chief went out himself and found the suspect's vehicle, which led to that suspect being arrested. That is the perfect example of leading by example. And so kudos to you, Chief. Kudos to the Wilmington Police Department for the job that you all do. And I mean, that's, of course, you know, I know you, and I know how you do certain stuff, but you know, that's what you call the top cop. So I appreciate you, Chief.
Thank you. With that, be safe. Thank you for taking an interest in your government. We stand adjourned.